Chapter 684. Other than the people at the Flaming River trading point, some of the people who were supposed to leave were also paying attention to the King's stoneworm. Among the first batch of people to leave, how many of them actually wanted to leave instead of hiding in the dark and waiting for an opportunity to rob the trading point? The Yinjiao people had a lot of good stuff and they were jealous. Usually, they were afraid of the Yinjiao people's strength, so they didn't dare to make a move. But now, wasn't this the perfect opportunity? If they didn't make good use of this opportunity, they would be letting themselves down. Although it was dangerous, it was necessary to take risks if they wanted to reap greater rewards. However, they didn't expect things to develop so differently from what they had expected. Until now, they still hadn't made a move. Even the teams that were far away from the Flaming River trading point still sent people to keep an eye on the movements around the trading point. Hence, although they were slower to find out what was going on around the trading point in the Flaming River, they still had a rough idea. At this moment, Xiao Xian didn't have time to care about other people's feelings. He only had his eyes on the King's stoneworm behind him to make sure it was still following him. After passing through the forest, the Flaming River was just ahead. Perhaps they had sensed the king beast's presence. The piranhas that used to be active in the river were all avoiding them. Without stopping, Xiao Xian took a deep breath and whistled. Cha-Cha, who had been following him in the air, flapped its wings and dived down. Xiao Xian grabbed Cha-Cha's claw with one hand and was brought to the top of the Flaming River. This was the most important part of the plan. The King's stoneworm's actions were the key to their success. In the forest, Gigu and the rest were getting more and more nervous. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly as they prayed in their hearts, "Ancestors, please protect us." This was not the small river from before. The Flaming River was a few hundred meters wide and close to 1,000 meters wide. How was the King's stoneworm going to cross such a huge river? Actually, according to Xiao Xian's plan, there was an ideal situation and a less ideal one. Of course, even if things didn't go as planned, as long as the King's stoneworm could cross the river, it would be good enough. The method of crossing the river was secondary. Their safety was more important. Did he come directly from the bottom of the river? Or should they go deeper into the river? Or... Xiao Xian grabbed Cha-Cha's claw and looked at the King's stoneworm that had stopped at the shore. "Come here. Come here quickly. Head this way." Xiao Xian shouted in his heart. In the sea of consciousness, the light shield that enveloped Yanjiao's totem flames grew brighter and brighter. The King's stoneworm that had stopped by the shore lifted its upper body, as if it wanted to see what was in front of it clearly. Those who were hiding in the forest could see the King's stoneworm's head clearly. Only half of its body was visible, but it was already taller than the tallest tree in the area. No one could ignore it. To the King's stoneworm, when everything around it was unfamiliar, it would naturally choose to follow a fire seed source that was close to it. However, the river in front of it made it pause for a moment. However, it only paused for a moment. As the river surface closest to it turned grayish-white, the front half of its body that had been raised up lay down again. On the surface of the river, where the front half of the King's stoneworm's body touched, the river water had turned into a grayish-white stone ground. Even the ripples on the water were very clear, retaining the shape they had when they were blown by the wind. However, as the King's stoneworm wriggled forward, the ripples no longer remained. Instead, they were replaced by the signature marks of the King's stoneworm. Crack, 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 the petrified water surface was still spreading rapidly. The King's stoneworm was like a petrified projectile. The water around it had turned into stone. However, compared to the large-scale petrification in the forest, the petrification on the water surface was more concentrated. It was only under the King's stoneworm's body and the areas around it. At this moment, the King's stoneworm's entire body was above the Flaming River. Xiao Xian took a deep breath. He was excited. Things were going according to his plan. It was the most perfect route. The King's stoneworm did not sink to the bottom of the river. It did not burrow underground. Instead, it continued to travel on the river. Nothing could stop it. Nothing. even if it was a river that was hundreds of thousands of meters wide. Something that people thought was impossible was happening because of the wriggling of the Beast King. This was the power of a king stoneworm. It was worthy of the title, King. As the king stoneworm continued to move forward, Xiao Xian had Cha-Cha bring him to the other side of the river. They controlled their speed and direction. They did not deviate from the route, nor did they go too far or too close. They maintained the most suitable position and flew forward. This was only the beginning. A long, straight bridge appeared in front of everyone's eyes. As the enormous body moved forward, it gradually extended forward. In the air, Wu He, who had been watching the scene, was so shocked that he almost fell off his long-winged bird. So that was it. To think that he actually had such a plan. They were using a king stoneworm as a laborer. How did they think of this? What a bunch of lunatics. Wu He wasn't the only one who was stunned. The people from the other tribes were also stunned. Even Duo Kong and the others who were leading the team to help were stunned. They wanted to rub their eyes and pat their heads to see if they were hallucinating because they were too nervous and tired. Although they knew what Xiao Xian was planning, they did not expect this to happen. As the king stoneworm wriggled, a stone bridge that extended from one side of the river to the other appeared above the vast flaming river. It could even turn water into stone. At the same time, some people were wondering how such a cumbersome king stoneworm could travel on the water as if it was flat ground. Even if it could turn water into stone, the stone it formed might not be able to support its heavy body. Could it be that the stone had reached the bottom of the river and was forming a stone bridge that cut off the flaming river? No, that was impossible. The flaming river looked very deep. How could it be cut off so easily? The water did not look like it was cut off either. Then, was this bridge floating on the water? Otherwise, how could it support such a huge king stoneworm? But how could a stone float on the water? It went against common sense, and no one could understand it no matter how hard they thought about it. While they were shocked by the scene on the river, they were also confused to the point of going crazy. Unimaginable. They thought that the Yanjiao people would lure the king stoneworm to another place because of its threat, but they were surprised to find that they had lured the king stoneworm back to the flaming river. Only now did they understand what the flaming horns were planning to do. The flaming horns were truly unfathomable. If the Yanjiao people knew what the others were thinking about them, they would cry out that it was all the first elder's idea. They were just carrying it out. They were just as shocked as the others. On the roof of the flaming river tower, Ao and a group of Yanjiao people were observing the king stoneworm's movements. However, as Xiao Xian lured the king stoneworm away, they could not see that far no matter how good their eyesight was. On the other side, Ao Zheng was using a telescope to observe the movements above the flaming river. From time to time, he would exclaim, "How can this be? How can this be?" So this was Ah Xian's plan. The others scratched their ears and cheeks when they heard this. They stopped looking at flaming river and stared fixedly at Ao. They thought, "Elder Ao, why don't you say something and let us know what's going on over there? Why don't you show us the telescope?" Something unexpected must have happened for the former chief to be so shocked. It must have been far beyond everyone's imagination. Something strange must have happened. They wanted to rush over to the Flaming River Castle to see what was going on, but they had to stay here. After all, the trading point, especially the Flaming River Castle, had to be guarded to prevent people from taking the opportunity to steal. Unfortunately, Ao was too engrossed in his stare and did not notice the reactions of the others. He did not have the slightest intention of letting go of the telescope either. The stone walls on both sides of the king's stoneworm were more than 7 meters wide. Including the king's stoneworm's body, the stone bridge was more than 20 meters wide on average. If they wanted to build a long bridge over such a wide river, it would not be easy even if they had more advanced technology, let alone the current technology. But now, a long stone bridge without any piers was gradually taking shape. Not only that, the king's stoneworm was wriggling steadily across the river without any change in speed. Very good. This risk was worth it. Xiao Xian looked at the long gray-white bridge that spanned across the river. He suppressed his excitement and the urge to immediately test the sturdiness of this stone bridge. He let out a long sigh. There was no rush. It would not be too late to go back and test it after everything was over. Xiao Xian had made a few preparations. Now, things were progressing smoothly according to his expectations. It was the most perfect route. It was even better than what he had expected. Even Xiao Xian himself had underestimated this king stoneworm. Although it was a little slow, there was no doubt about the king stoneworm's valiant ability. 1/5, 1/3, 1/2, 2/3, this miraculous stone bridge was about to be completed. The people who were staring at the river stared until their eyes were dry. They could not bear to blink, afraid that they would miss an important moment. They were very glad that they had come along to witness the birth of such a miracle. The wind picked up and became stronger. It blew down from the upper reaches of the flaming river, causing waves to crash against the stone bridge behind the king stoneworm. Boom! The waves splashed into splashes. However, no matter how hard the waves crashed, the stone bridge that looked like it was floating on the water did not move at all. It was as if it was proving to the world that it was sturdy. Chapter 685. Yinjiao's people were also paying attention to the situation. Many of the patrols were hiding nearby. According to Gigu's message, they had to maintain a safe distance from the king stoneworm. If they got too close, there was a risk of being petrified. Everyone breathed softly and tried their best to hide their presence. Before they received orders, they only needed to stay here and watch. They were not allowed to make any moves or expose themselves too early. They would wait and see. On the other side, Xiao Xian had already been brought to the riverbank by Cha Cha. After landing, he saw the king's stoneworm following closely behind him. He didn't stay for long and ran towards the forest. The king's stoneworm finally reached the riverbank. It paused for a moment, then started to follow Xiao Xian again. The long bridge that crossed the flaming river extended all the way to the riverbank and connected with the king's stoneworm's wriggling trail. A large area of the riverbank had turned gray. After reaching the riverbank, the king's stoneworm returned to its original state. It rumbled again. It didn't look back at the long bridge behind it. It didn't care about its shocking actions. Perhaps it wasn't anything special to it. It just continued to follow Xiao Xian. The Yinjiao patrols hiding in the forest watched the king's stoneworm leave with Xiao Xian. After they were far away, they let out a long sigh. They were also shocked by what they saw on the river. It left? Yes, it left with the first elder. It probably won't turn back. What's that on the river? What did the king's stoneworm make? That should be called a bridge? I heard the first elder mention it before, but he said that his abilities were limited so he couldn't build it, someone said. So the bridge is built now? Is that it? Another person pointed at the gray bridge on the flaming river. Should be. Why don't we go take a look? Let's not. We'll wait for the first elder and the others to come back. Wei stopped the person who wanted to go over. Hey, boss, look over there. Someone's coming. The person behind Wei shouted towards the opposite shore. Wei looked over. There were indeed people on the other side of the flaming river who had stepped onto the gray bridge. I think it's Leader Duo Kong. Oh, and Leader Ta. Elder Zheng Luo and Chief are here too. On the other side of the flaming river, Duo Kong brought his men to the side of the newly formed gray bridge. Gigu, Zheng Luo, and Ta, who came from the flaming river trading point, all came to the side of the bridge. Because the king's stoneworm paused here before crossing the river, the area of petrification at this end of the bridge was larger than at other places. Gigu stepped on the petrified grass under his feet. The petrified grass here was slightly harder than the ones in the forest. When he stepped on the petrified grass in the forest, he could still hear cracking sounds. But here, he couldn't break the grass without using some force. Let's go take a look. Zheng Luo suggested. give it a try? Tower was also looking forward to it. Let's give it a try. As the current leader, Gigu led the way and stepped onto the stone bridge. If the king's stoneworm could walk on it steadily, all of them added together wouldn't be as heavy as the king's stoneworm. Logically speaking, they should be fine too. Gigu, Jingluo, Duo Kong and Tu stepped onto the new bridge. Behind them, Duo Kang's team of Yinjiao warriors followed. To them, this was a new experience. After Gigu stepped on it, he stepped on it with some force. The hard stone surface under his feet made him feel more at ease. It was very hard and firm. As expected, a place that could withstand the king's stoneworm's weight wouldn't collapse so easily. After the first step, the second and third steps were even faster. They were nervous at the beginning, but after walking for more than 10 meters, their steps became more relaxed. They could walk. They could really walk on water. Those who stepped onto the stone bridge felt the firm ground under their feet and the waves on both sides of the bridge. They took deep breaths. The waves splashed against the stone bridge and splashed onto their bodies. The layer of stone powder that covered their bodies from following the stoneworm was washed away by the water. The stone powder was from the dust caused by the king's stoneworm's movements. It wasn't from the stoneworm's body, so when it was washed away by the water, it mixed together. Everyone who stepped onto the bridge had grayish-white stains on their faces and bodies. They looked very haggard, but at this time, no one cared about that. They just wiped their faces and couldn't help but smile. With a long bridge here, it would be more convenient for Yinjiao. After all, ships weren't everything. They didn't have as many giant mountain eagles as the Hui tribe. Even if they did, it would still be inconvenient. However, if there was a long bridge that spanned across the two shores, then everything would be much simpler. If they wanted to transport goods between the Flaming River trading point and the Flaming Horn headquarters, they could do so at any time, rain or shine. In the future, when they controlled both sides of the Flaming River, even tribesmen who couldn't follow them on the ships could travel between the two sides easily. This bridge connected the two sides of the Flaming River. Yinjiao's group of about 30 people attracted the attention of hundreds of pairs of eyes. Wu He, who was in the sky, and the people from the other tribes who were hiding in the forest behind them, as well as the people from the headquarters on the other side of the bridge, were all staring at their movements. They craned their necks to watch them walk from one end of the bridge to the other side step by step. They really can walk across. A tribesman who was sent by an expedition team to scout the situation stared at the back of the group on the stone bridge. His voice was full of surprise. I want to walk across too, but that's Yinjiao territory. Another person hiding behind a tree stared at Gigu's group. Some of the braver ones came out of the forest and walked to the side of the stone bridge. However, they didn't dare to step on it directly. From their point of view, since the Yinjiao made this place, it definitely belonged to the Yinjiao people. Without the Yinjiao's permission, it would be considered trespassing and provocation if they stepped on it. After the incident with the king beast, they were even more wary of the Yinjiao people, so it was better to be cautious. However, looking at the stone bridge in front of them, their hearts itched unbearably. Someone quickly went over and stepped on it. Then, like the wind, they ran into the forest and hid. It could be considered a personal experience, and they were addicted to it. The others watched the figure disappear into the forest like the wind, then looked at the bridge not far away. They gritted their teeth, took 2 big steps forward, stepped on the bridge, then quickly retreated and ran away. In the sky, Wu He, who was sitting on his long-winged bird, watched the Yinjiao people successfully walk from one end of the bridge to the other. He secretly decided that when he saw the other Changles, he would brag about it. It wasn't easy to witness the birth of such a miracle. Luckily, he was brave enough at the crucial moment. Otherwise, if he left just like that and heard about it from others, he would definitely regret it. Regardless of how the others felt, Shao Xian continued to lead the king's stoneworm into the forest. The king's stoneworm wouldn't discuss when to rest with Shao Xian. As long as it continued to follow behind, Shao Xian couldn't stop. He kept running towards the king's stoneworm's nest. However, the king's stoneworm had probably used up too much energy to cross the river. When it reached the bank, it slowed down quite a bit. To it, wriggling on the ground was more difficult than underground. Stoneworms ate rocks. Xiao Xian wasn't sure what the king's stoneworm ate. Whether it ate rocks, soil, or the unknown stones deep underground, it was all underground. It was used to wriggling underground, so of course it was very uncomfortable on the ground. Therefore, not long after it reached the bank, the king's stoneworm burrowed into the ground. Of course, it still followed Xiao Xian. It didn't burrow into the ground, but kept a distance from the surface. This allowed it to wriggle underground and sense Xiao Xian's presence. It followed closely behind Xiao Xian. Perhaps it had used up a lot of energy to cross the river, and with the 2 days of running, the area of petrification had narrowed. After the king's stoneworm burrowed into the ground, the vegetation on the ground wasn't petrified. However, if a layer of grass was removed, the petrified soil would gradually be revealed. Xiao Xian could sense the king's stoneworm's location. He didn't stop. As he brought the king's stoneworm back into the forest, his plan was almost complete. This was a very good sign. Even if the vegetation on the ground wasn't petrified, the king's stoneworm's aura was still very intimidating to the various beasts in the forest. Sensing the king's stoneworm's approach, the fearsome beasts hurriedly avoided it. This made it much easier for Xiao Xian to move forward. Without any disturbance from the fearsome beasts, Xiao Xian smoothly made his way to his destination. It wasn't a short journey, and when he crossed the river, the sun was already setting. When the sun set and night arrived, Xiao Xian was still some distance away from the king's stoneworm's nest. He had to rush through the night. Fortunately, he had special vision at night so he could maintain his speed in the forest at night. When a hunting team entered the forest, they would consider the distribution of fearsome beasts and members to decide whether to go in a straight line or take a detour. But now, Xiao Xian was alone, with a king beast following behind him. In this forest that Xiao Xian was familiar with, no fearsome beast would have the mind to attack Xiao Xian when a king beast approached. Therefore, Xiao Xian boldly ran through the shortest distance. The night passed, and when the dark sky began to brighten, Xiao Xian finally saw the tall mountain. Probably sensing a familiar scent, the king's stoneworm behind Xiao Xian suddenly sped up. It was so excited that it couldn't control its strength. A large patch of grayish-white appeared on the ground and expanded rapidly. The king's stoneworm didn't break out of the ground. It was still underground. Not only did it not come out, it even burrowed deeper into the ground. Xiao Xian could sense that the king's stoneworm was far away. The grayish-white patch on the ground stopped expanding. Xiao Xian also concealed his aura. He had done what he needed to do. Roar, roar, squeak, in the mountain ahead, the cries of various beasts could be heard. The beasts that entered the mountain while the king's stoneworm was away were greatly frightened. They scrambled to get out of the cave. The king of the mountain had returned. How could they have the courage to stay in the mountain? Chapter 686. Xiao Xian rested beside the king's stoneworm's nest for about an hour. He hunted a fearsome beast and shared it with the Cha-Cha. Because the king's stoneworm had just returned, all the other fearsome beasts in the area had fled. They wouldn't come near for a while, so Xiao Xian wouldn't have any trouble staying here. Not long after the king's stoneworm entered the mountain, the commotion died down and everything calmed down. The king's stoneworm didn't come out of the mountain again. Xiao Xian could sense that the king's stoneworm was at the bottom of the mountain. It seemed to be in a good mood too. Although it didn't show much emotion, Xiao Xian could guess that it was happy to come back. Was it really lost? It had no sense of direction and couldn't figure out how to get back to the mountain. All it could do was run in a random direction, but it ended up going further and further away. How stupid. However, its strength was feared by many people and beasts. If Xiao Xian hadn't lured it back, it would probably have caused a lot of trouble in the mainland. It didn't care where you could petrify. It would stop wherever it wanted. With its intelligence, it didn't think too much and didn't have any complicated thoughts. Because of this, no one could predict what it would do if it started to act recklessly. Luckily, it was all over now. The bat leader that was left at the Flaming Horn headquarters should be returning to its nest soon. Xiao Xian's heart burned with excitement when he thought about the bridge that appeared on the Flaming River. That was a bridge that spanned hundreds of thousands of meters. He didn't know what the bridge was like. Could it meet his standards? The more he thought about it, the more restless Xiao Xian became. After eating the fearsome beast meat, he recovered a lot of energy. Looking at the clouds in the sky, Xiao Xian got up to extinguish the fire and clean up the traces. Then, he set off. Xiao Xian met Duo Kong and the rest along the way. It turned out that after crossing the long bridge, Duo Kong had brought people to chase after Xiao Xian. He thought that if Xiao Xian needed help, they could help. He didn't expect Xiao Xian to have already settled everything. Has the king's stoneworm gone back? Duo Kong asked. It's gone back. It probably won't come out again unless there's another disaster, Xiao Xian said. That's good. That's great. Duo Kong said a few words in a row. They really didn't want to fight against a king stoneworm. Also, the king stoneworm seemed to be more powerful than the salt beast they had seen before. The king stoneworm was so powerful that it could even turn water into stone. How could they fight against such a beast? Knowing that the beast kings wouldn't pose a threat to the tribe for the time being, everyone felt relieved. Duo Kong told Xiao Xian about what happened on the bridge. We can really walk. We all came from that, bridge. Yes, from that bridge. It's not like a wooden raft that sinks. It's stable. It's like walking on solid ground. Duo Kong looked excited. In his impression, the so-called bridge was mostly just a huge piece of wood, just like the tree trunk they used to cross the artificial river outside the tribe when they were on the other side of the sea. But now, he saw a real bridge. Only then did he understand the meaning of the word bridge. So a bridge could look like this. So a bridge could cover such a long distance. This was a shock to his mind. When the disaster happened, the tribe came here from the connected wooden rafts. Xiao Xian had also mentioned the bridge. But at that time, everyone thought differently from Xiao Xian. They didn't think it was necessary and impossible. Now, it had really happened. They didn't rely on manpower. They used the king's stoneworm's power to complete it. When he thought about how this bridge belonged to his tribe, Duo Kong couldn't help but feel proud. Just like the other tribes, Duo Kong thought that since Xiao Xian was the reason for the formation of this bridge, it must belong to Yanjiao. He would fight anyone who wanted it. How could there be such a long bridge in the Central Plains? The slave masters on the other side of the sea always acted like they were superior. But did they have such a long bridge? No. None at all. Only Yanjiao had it. It was the only thing in the world. Didn't you see how many people are staring at it? They're still gathered at the bridge and won't leave. They say they want to walk on it. Duo Kang's smile almost reached his ears. Xiao Xian was also happy to hear this. Indeed, many people here would think of building a ship when they saw a river. Very few people would think of building a bridge directly. Plus, the Flaming River was so wide that even fewer people would want to build a bridge. This time, it was a success. However, they couldn't be too happy just yet. How long could the bridge last? Whether it could withstand the Flaming River's current would require time to prove. When they returned to the tribe from the forest, they also brought back news that the king's stoneworm had returned to the mountain. This meant that the king beast crisis was truly over. The Flaming River trading point was in a state of jubilation. The people who had been guarding the trading point all this time were hoping that the people on duty would come and trade with them soon. Only then would they be able to personally see the legendary bridge made by the king beast. A miracle. It really is a miracle. EC stood in front of the stone bridge, carefully examining the miraculous bridge that had appeared here. Grasshopper's entire body was tense. The thorns on his back stood up. Even though the king beast had left, the bridge made by the king's stoneworm still had the king beast's aura. It might not affect other people, but for Grasshopper, who had the bloodline of a fearsome beast, it was different. Just a little bit of the king beast's aura was enough to make him nervous. More and more people gathered around the stone bridge. It was only after Gigu sent people over to surround the area that they stopped their curiosity from going up the bridge. However, even if they couldn't go up the bridge, they could still see the Yinjiao team coming and going on the stone bridge. They had a rough idea of what this bridge was like. There were many dangerous elements in the flaming river. This was something that the expedition team had personally experienced. There were countless fish that were more ferocious than wild beasts. This was also why the Yinjiao people had always crossed the river by boat. The wooden rafts that Yinjiao used when they first came back had already been put away. As the apocalyptic day passed, all kinds of ferocious fish in the river became more active. It was no longer suitable for them to walk on the wooden rafts. Standing on the rafts would make it difficult to fight against the river beasts that jumped out of the water. But now, the formation of such a wide and long bridge could solve many problems. This bridge was quickly given a name. Of course, it was named after the Crown River. Tall stone tablets were erected at both ends of the bridge. The tablets were carved with the Yinjiao totem and the words, Great Bridge of the Flaming River. The indentations on the tablets were painted with crimson red paint. It was very eye-catching on the gray stone tablets. There were many people from other tribes who came to watch the Yinjiao people place the tablets. Even though they couldn't get close, it still didn't dampen their spirits. Flaming River. Great Bridge? Someone read out the words on the tablet. Bridge? It fits the name of the bridge very well. It's really big. A bridge that could cross the flaming river, a bridge that could withstand the wriggling of a king beast, a bridge that didn't even budge when the Yinjiao carried a huge stone tablet over. If it wasn't big, then who was? But some people thought that the word big must mean the size of the bridge. Maybe it was just a code name? Could there be a second or third bridge in the future? Someone asked in a low voice. The others didn't answer directly, but some people were thinking. As long as the king beast was still around, who could say for sure? Xiao Xian came to the bridge to take a look. At the same time, he asked the drumming tribe to help him take a look underwater. Even though he could use his senses to sense the situation underwater, with the help of the drumming tribe, he could see more details. Below the bridge, the part that was petrified was in the shape of an inverted triangle. The deepest part was more than 20 meters deep. There were no piers. If it weren't for the fact that the two sides of the bridge were connected to the shore, it could even be said that the bridge was floating on water. Was a bridge like this really sturdy? They could only wait and see. After investigating the stone bridge, Xiao Xian thought of the small river that was petrified by the king's stoneworm on the other side of the river. Even though the flow of that river wasn't fast, when the king's stoneworm petrified the water in that river, it directly cut off the flow of the river. After that, Xiao Xian brought the king's stoneworm back and cut off the flow of the river again. That was why there were now 2 bridges that cut off the flow of the river. There weren't many dangerous fish in that river. At most, there were some piranhas that lived near the flaming river. However, because the king's stoneworm petrified the water, there wouldn't be any fish that would come near for a while. Xiao Xian ordered people to set up a net at the upstream and downstream of the 2 stone bridges to prevent fish from coming near. After that, some Yinjiao warriors and drumming tribesmen went into the water to dig holes in the 2 small bridges. They couldn't bear to touch the big bridge above the flaming river, but they were willing to work on the 2 small bridges above the river. Clang! The chisel only left a shallow dent on the bridge formed by the petrified water. It's so hard. Really? Let me try. Clang! It's true. This hardness is comparable to high-quality stone, right? Isn't this bridge made of water? Why is it so hard? You don't understand the strength of a king beast. Hurry up, let's dig a big hole here and use the stones to make stone tools. Yes, yes, yes. Hurry up. Curious about the quality of the stones, the people digging the holes in the bridge worked even faster. The chisels they used were made of new bronze, so it was easy to chisel. If they just wanted to clear the river, they didn't have to dig a hole. They could just dig another channel to go around the two bridges. However, the Yinjiao people wanted to study the stones, so they dug a bridge. It took some time to dig a hole. Halfway through, someone dug out a stone the size of a watermelon and weighed it in his hand. He said in surprise, "This stone is so light." Not far away, the travelers watching the Yinjiao people dig a hole snickered. Do you think we'll believe that? One of the Yinjiao people's lies, "This stone is very light." Light my ass. Xiao Xian didn't stay there to watch them dig a hole. Duo Kong was guarding the bridge, so he didn't need to be there. Xiao Xian was called over by Ao to guard the 1,000-grain gold field at night. Since the king's stoneworm had left, they wouldn't meet the bat leader at night, right? However, when night fell, the bats still came. Xiao Xian stared at the bat leader that appeared again and remained silent. Why aren't you leaving? Your little brother is waiting for you to come back. Chapter 687. The king's stoneworm had left, but the problem was no less troublesome than the king's stoneworm. It remained in Yinjiao's fields. It did not destroy Yinjiao's things, nor did it come out to scare people. Every night, at a fixed time, it would appear silently and cut an ear of grain from the 1,000-grain gold's fields. It would then hang on the long and narrow leaf of the 1,000-grain gold, quietly watching the people guarding the fields. She didn't know how it managed to hang on to the leaf with its weight, but the leaf didn't even change the angle of its fall. What do we do? After the bat leader left, Ao wiped his forehead helplessly and asked Xiao Xian. Even after a few more times, he could not remain calm in front of the bat leader. Every time, he would be so nervous that he would break out in a cold sweat. Xiao Xian could feel the direction of the bat leader. When it stopped flying, although Xiao Xian could not determine where it was hiding, he could feel that it was not far from Yinjiao. It was not going back to the Bat Mountain in the depths of the forest. The days passed, and the 1,000-grain gold in the fields gradually matured. It was not as green anymore. Maybe it was because the weather was good, or because it was well taken care of after the fertilizer was improved, or maybe it was because it was used to the soil here. All in all, compared to when it was on the other side of the sea, the 1,000-grain gold was maturing earlier. Based on the current trend, the 1,000-grain gold would mature in about 10 days. Hearing Ao's question, Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said, "As long as it doesn't cause trouble for Yinjiao. You should have noticed that after it came here every day, there were fewer pests in the fields. In the fields, there were more grains that were about to mature at this time of the year. The more this time of year, the more insects there would be. Many strange flying insects would fly out of the forest, or insects that would come out of the ground to nibble on leaves or fruits. There were also insects that came from the forest after smelling the scent. The people guarding the fields had to get rid of many insects every day. The edible ones were all supplied to the trading point. The people at Yinjiao headquarters were tired of eating roasted insects. The green ducks also had a limited appetite, so they could not get rid of all the insects. As for those that couldn't be eaten, they would be kept as fertilizer. It was fine during the day, at least they could see and clean it up easily. However, it was much more troublesome at night. The local crops were about to ripen, and for those insects, the temptation of food was greater than their natural inclination towards light. The effect of the bug trap of the water moon stone was quite limited. But after the bat leader appeared, almost no flying insects appeared at night, and the field was quite quiet. This kind of phenomenon appeared in some of the fields not far from the 1,000-grain gold. It saved everyone a lot of work. No one could tell whether the appearance of the bat leader was a blessing or a curse. Of course, it didn't mean that bat leader was here to help Yinjiao get rid of the insects. Xiao Xian felt that it was waiting for the 1,000-grain gold to mature. Many animals didn't need anyone to teach them. They were born with the ability to sense things that were beneficial to them. Now, the bat leader was staring at the 1,000-grain gold because it felt that the 1,000-grain gold would be beneficial to it. In this special field in Yanjiao, other than the 1,000-grain gold, there were also some seeds from Jiju. Some of them were good grains, but bat leader didn't appear in those fields. It only stared at the 1,000-grain gold. "We'll see when the 1,000-grain gold ripens," said Xiao Xian. Ao nodded. "That's all we can do." As long as the bat leader didn't cause too much trouble and didn't cause too much damage to the flaming horns, they could still afford a small portion of the 1,000-grain gold. Just treat it as a reward for the bat leader. After estimating the ripening time of the 1,000-grain gold, the tribe had already started planning for the harvest. When they were at the other side of the sea, the harvest of the 1,000-grain gold was very lively. Now, there were more 1,000-grain gold planted in the headquarters. The scale of the operation was also larger, so they had to plan carefully. Although the other fields weren't as crazy as the 1,000-grain gold, they still had to consider. Harvesting from the fields and the flaming river bridge kept Xiao Xian so busy that he didn't have time to continue studying the monster in the secret underground room of the flaming river castle. After the king's stoneworms crisis was resolved, the flaming river trading point didn't calm down. Instead, it became even more lively. From the beginning to the end of the incident, it didn't take long. At the very least, it didn't involve the trading point for long. The teams that left in a hurry didn't go far at all. Some people just found a place to rest and wait for news after they left. No one expected that instead of the flaming river trading point being destroyed, they would receive news of a miracle on the water. At that time, the king beast suddenly charged out of the ground and turned the surrounding forest into stone. Many people died. They all turned into stone. At that time, the king beast went straight for the flaming river trading point. Yinjiao's chief was there too. He brought his people to meet the king beast. After that, he talked about how he'd witnessed the battle. The people who went to investigate came back and vividly described the situation at that time. The others in the group were stunned when they heard it, and then they began to shout. The person who told the story stood on a large rock with one hand holding a knife at his waist and the other pointing upwards. I heard Yanjiao's grand elder shout at the king beast, "Follow me." And then? What happened? The others asked expectantly. What happened? So the beast king left with him. The crowd immediately hissed in disbelief. That was a beast king. How could it follow someone so obediently? They didn't believe it anyway. The person standing on the rock looked around. Seeing that no one believed him, he became anxious. "If you don't believe me, go and take a look." Wherever the king beast went, it turned into stone. The forest outside the flaming river trading point is all turned into stone. There are traces on the ground too. Go and take a look. The path of petrification stretches from the forest to the flaming river, then crosses the flaming river and reaches the other side. Really? Someone's heart started to waver. But they couldn't imagine the situation. Why would I lie to you? Let's go, I'll take you there. The king beast is gone anyway, it's no longer a threat. I'm guessing that this is all Yanjiao's scheme. It's all part of Yanjiao's plan. When the team returned to the flaming river trading point and saw the petrified forest and the traces on the ground, they couldn't help but believe it. Although the rumors were exaggerated, some things were true. Many travelers who left the trading point beat their chests and stomped their feet. Why didn't they insist on staying longer at the flaming river trading point? As a travel team, especially those with rich experience, they were curious about many things, especially those shocking things. But they missed it this time. But even if they missed the chance to see the king beast, seeing the traces left behind by the king beast would still make them feel better. Hence, no matter if it was the area the Flaming Horn tribe marked as their territory, or the long bridge that spanned across the flaming river, travelers all stopped to look at it. And those who left also brought the news to all parts of the mainland. Yanjiao became popular again. Not only was it popular, it was even more popular than the last time the Flaming River Trading Point was built. The names Yanjiao, Flaming River Trading Point, and Flaming River Bridge were spread everywhere. Now, in all the other trading points on the mainland, as long as there were travel teams, large or small trading points or resting areas, there were people talking about the Flaming River Bridge that Yanjiao used the king beast to build. There were many trading points in the Flaming River. Many people weren't interested in the Flaming River's trading point and didn't want to travel all the way to see it. However, the king beast had built a long stone bridge that spanned the entire river. This piqued many people's curiosity and they formed groups to go to the Flaming River. Whether it was the suspicion of the Flaming Horn tribe's king beast or the curiosity of the king beast's bridge, many teams were attracted to the Flaming River trading point. Whether it was to find out the truth or to see a miracle, more and more people gathered. Humans tended to follow the crowd. Even if people from smaller tribes were cautious about the king beast's visit, they would still want to join in the fun when there were so many people around. In the past, before the Flaming River trading point existed, they would spend most of their time inside their tribe or in the forest near their tribe. However, ever since they came to the Flaming River trading point, they fell in love with the lively chatter and excitement. Not to mention, they could even trade for things they wanted there. This was also why the Flaming River trading point was getting more and more lively. In the forest not far from the Flaming River trading point, 7 long-winged birds gathered together. There was a person sitting on each bird. At this moment, they were all looking at the gray stone bridge in front of them. Other than Wu He, the other 6 people were shocked. Too bad you didn't see what happened. What a pity. Wu He looked at his companions who had just arrived at the Flaming River trading point with a sorrowful expression. He almost said, "You're all Chang Li's for nothing." Someone's eyebrows twitched. They wanted to mock Wu He, but it was a pity that they couldn't witness the magnificent feat of building a bridge with their own eyes. That was one of the biggest regrets in life. It was rare for them to be interested in something like this. Let's not talk about that. Wu He, what are you planning to do? Another person was impatient with Wu He's smug expression and urged him. They had just arrived, so there were some things they didn't know. Wu He, who had arrived earlier than them, was probably the most familiar with this place. They needed to find something else to comfort themselves with. My target isn't the trading point. Let's go to Yanjiao's headquarters. There should be a lot of good stuff in Yanjiao's fields at this time. Wu He smiled and rubbed his hands together. His eyes were filled with anticipation. During this period of observation, Wu He noticed that while everyone was focused on the Flaming River trading point, the Flaming River Bridge, and Yanjiao's new land, Yanjiao's headquarters were doing something strange. With his observation skills, he could see that Yanjiao's headquarters were planning something else. It had nothing to do with the trading point or the Flaming River Bridge. In the end, his conclusion after a few days of observation was that there was something good in Yanjiao's fields. Something good? The others' eyes lit up. That was right. This was the season to start harvesting. Good. 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 We finally have something to do. No matter if there was really something good there or not, they would still go and check it out personally. They didn't want to be idle anyway. Are we going now? Let's go take a look first. Wu He patted his long-winged bird and pointed in the direction of Yanjiao's fields. Let's go. They didn't dare to go directly to Yanjiao's headquarters, but they could still approach the fields from the side. Yanjiao's fields were not small. Even if they were discovered by the Yanjiao people, there wouldn't be many Yanjiao people who could chase after them. But, after he gave the order, he waited for a while. The long-winged bird under him didn't move. It remained in its original position. It wasn't just Wu He. The other 6 people's long-winged birds were the same. Let's go. Disobedient again? Wu He continued to urge them. He patted the long-winged bird. The long-winged bird made a coo sound and flew forward slowly. It flapped its wings half-heartedly, as if it was extremely unwilling. Its attitude was even worse than when they had approached the king beast. What's wrong? Someone asked. Coo, the long-winged bird beneath Wu He let out a cry. This caused Wu He to furrow his brows, and a few deep wrinkles appeared between his brows. There's something there that the long-winged bird is afraid of. Wu He looked at the direction they had planned to fly in. His expression was unusually serious. After the incident with the king beast, any abnormality would make him nervous. Even though they wanted to find something to play with, they still had to be cautious. Could it be that Yanjiao's tamed eagle you mentioned before? Someone guessed. No, it's not that. Wu He shook his head. The long-winged bird is afraid of the eagle, but not to this extent. Wu He patted the long-winged bird's neck. Some feathers were already standing up. This was a sign that the long-winged bird was very nervous. He looked at the others. They were all the same. During your investigation, did you find out any other secrets of Yanjiao? Someone beside Wu He asked. Wu He pursed his lips. Yanjiao's headquarters are too heavily guarded. It's different from the trading point. I've only been here for a short time. How could I have found out so much? Could it be that king beast? Someone else asked. Not likely. Wu He shook his head. After a moment of silence, someone laughed. Then we should go and take a look. As soon as this was said, everyone, including Wu He, laughed as well. The Changlis were very curious. The more they didn't know something, the more curious they were. If they didn't find out, they wouldn't even be able to sleep peacefully. The long-winged bird's behavior didn't make them give up on their plan. Instead, it made them even more excited. Especially the 6 people who came later. They thought to themselves, even if we didn't see the king beast, maybe we'll find something interesting. It would be best if we could uncover some of Yanjiao's secrets and sell them to other tribes at a high price. They were very happy with this thought. He he he. Chapter 688. Xiao Xian didn't go to the Flaming River trading point as it was the busiest time for the harvest. Instead, he stayed at Yanjiao's headquarters, eating and sleeping in the farmhouse. Xiao Xian knew about the spies in the sky. Yanjiao had never relaxed their aerial surveillance, but to Yanjiao, their aerial power was still too weak. Now, Yanjiao only had 2 birds that could monitor the sky. One was Gigu's snow falcon, and the other was a cha-cha. Because the bat leader was nearby, cha-cha wasn't at the headquarters. Instead, it went to the trading point. As for the headquarters, the snow falcon stayed at the core area, which was the mountain where everyone lived. In Yanjiao's headquarters, other than those 2, there was also a flock of green ducks that could fly. Not to mention whether they would listen to orders and fight, just based on their fighting ability. They were already very fat from the insects in the fields. They were no longer as weak as when they first migrated here. Their movements weren't as nimble as before. They didn't have as many giant mountain eagles as the Hui tribe, nor did they have as many tamed birds as the Feather tribe. Of course, they couldn't send their birds to attack suspicious people. Xiao Xian ordered the people on the watchtower to use their binoculars to monitor the spies. If they made any strange movements and flew directly towards Yanjiao, they would shoot them down with their bows. If their goal was open and above board, they could have used the Flaming River Bridge to come to Yanjiao's headquarters. However, they flew in so sneakily, it was obvious that they weren't good people. They were just like robbers. Within the Yanjiao tribe, there was a tense atmosphere. There was no joy from the harvest as expected. How is it? Xiao Xian asked Ao, who was sweating profusely as he ran over. It's almost done. The wanderers have already warned them to stay at home for the next 2 days. Chi and the rest who are taking care of the fields won't be coming over either. The area around the fields is under martial law. Ao took out the water bottle hanging on his waist and gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. After a busy morning, his throat was almost smoking. As the 1,000-grain gold ripened, the Flaming Horn tribesmen, who had set their sights on this plot of land, suddenly noticed that the crops in the other plots of land were also ripening these past 2 days. Those were all crop seeds brought back from the other side of the sea. It was also the first time they had planted them. They didn't know if there would be other unforeseen events if they didn't harvest them in time. This was because some crops had an optimal harvest time. After that time, the quality of the fruits would severely decline. Yinjiao still didn't have enough manpower. They needed people at the trading point, and they also needed people here. Especially when the peak harvest season was coming, they would be even busier. But this year's situation was special. They didn't dare to let those young warriors who weren't strong come over to the fields. Instead, they arranged for them to stay at the edge of the fields. They found another 200 people from the drumming tribe to help with the harvest. Although the people of the drumming tribe looked fierce, they were trustworthy. They wouldn't steal when they were busy. Many people in the drumming tribe didn't have much to do during the day. Since Yinjiao needed manpower and they were willing to pay, of course they were happy. But Xiao Xian also told them in advance that there would be certain risks during the harvest. They might encounter some difficulties and dangers, so they had to be prepared and not panic. The people of the drumming tribe weren't afraid of dangers. In the past, when they harvested water moonstones, they would also encounter dangers. That was why the drumming tribe's chief, Fan Mu, and the others didn't care. They felt that they could handle anything calmly. Of course, Yinjiao's main target was the 1,000-grain gold fields. That was what they valued the most. "Is it here yet?" Ao asked Xiao Xian in a low voice. The bat leader's matter wasn't made public. Ao only told the people guarding the 1,000-grain gold fields in private. Those who were sent here to guard the 1,000-grain gold fields were all trustworthy. They wouldn't say much. Xiao Xian knew who Ao was talking about. "It's here. It's already in Yinjiao's territory. It's in the mountains over there." Xiao Xian raised his hand and pointed. Ao looked over. Over there was a stone mountain where the warriors used to train. There were no plants, and it looked bare. However, there were some caves formed by natural erosion. The bat leader should be in one of the caves on the mountain over there. Now the warriors had many tasks every day. They didn't have time to practice hitting stones in the mountains. The smell of humans was almost gone. Sometimes, they could see some birds building their nests there. Now, the bat leader was on the mountain over there. As the 1,000-grain gold ripened, the bat leader didn't go far. It stayed on the mountain and walked around the fields every night. No wonder I heard the patrolling people say there were fewer flying stone squirrels. It's because of this bat, Ao sighed. The bat leader really came. It wasn't just the flying stone squirrels. There were fewer beasts in Yinjiao's territory. Although there weren't many beasts in Yinjiao's territory, there were still a few mountains. There were many flying stone squirrels and other small beasts in the mountains where the wanderers lived. They would steal things from time to time and fight with the wanderers. But recently, there were fewer of them. Even if they weren't natural enemies, the pressure of a high-level beast would still affect them. Even the few beasts in the tribe were only on the mountain where they lived. They weren't close to the fields. The wanderers were told to stay at home for 2 days. They wondered if Yinjiao was guarding against them and preventing them from stealing grains. Some of them muttered unhappily. But soon, they found that it wasn't just the wanderers who lived in Yinjiao. Even the Yinjiao people who took care of the fields were taken away. Other than the murderous Yinjiao warriors, it was hard to see anyone else. "I just saw Yinjiao's patrolling team pass by. They looked serious, as if they were preparing to go to war." A person who had just gone out to pee returned to the cave and discussed with the others. "Something must have happened. Isn't it for the grains?" An old man didn't understand. "Definitely not. Which tribe would look like that when they're harvesting grains?" "They're all like rocks," the young man said. Thinking about it, the Yinjiao people were indeed too serious recently. They didn't even smile much. Could it be a king beast? The woman who was tanning the animal's skin was so scared that her hands trembled. "No. It can't be, right?" At this moment, everyone was unsure. After all, this place was similar to the fearsome beast forest. It was even more dangerous. At least when they were in the fearsome beast forest, they didn't encounter a king beast. Besides, why couldn't there be another beast king after the first one had come? It shouldn't be. If it was, the Yinjiao people would definitely let the children in the tribe hide first. But as far as I know, the Yinjiao people didn't do that. They just put the farmland under martial law, a middle-aged man who looked quite steady said while tapping his fingers. As they were talking, they suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside. The people in the cave were instantly silent. Heir 2, what's the hurry? The middle-aged man who looked steady hurriedly got up and greeted him. The person who came was Heir. He had a good relationship with Jiao Wu and the others in Yanjiao. After the wanderers were settled here, 3 people were assigned to take care of them. Heir's position was the second, so now everyone called him Heir 2. Heir didn't waste any time talking nonsense. There was no trace of a smile on his face. He warned, we just received news that the Flaming Horns asked us to listen for any movements. If we hear 2 hurried wooden whistles, we have to close the cave door. The middle-aged man handed a bowl of warm meat soup to Heir and asked in a low voice, Heir 2, what happened? We don't feel safe. You know, the king beast incident just passed. Heir didn't argue. He took the bowl and drank it in big gulps. He was tired of going from house to inform people. After drinking, his expression softened. He thought for a while and said, I don't know what happened, but it's definitely not a king beast. As for the notice just now, it was sent by the Grand Elder of Yinjiao, Shao Xian. When they heard that it was Shao Xian's order, everyone's expression changed. Who was Shao Xian? He was the only Grand Elder in Yinjiao. His status was higher than the Yinjiao chief and shaman. He was the founder of the Flaming River trading point. Even the Flaming River Bridge was built by him. How could he lie? The people who were complaining at first didn't have any thoughts now. They just had to do as they were told. The Grand Elder was definitely right. Oh right, seal the windows too. Just leave some small holes for ventilation. Don't open the door no matter what you hear, unless you hear the whistle again, Heir reminded them again before leaving. Ah, okay, the middle-aged man quickly replied. After Heir left, he went to the next house to inform. There were many caves in the mountains and many tourists lived there. He had to finish his job quickly. Although the people in the cave still didn't know what was going on, they still made preparations according to the notice. The Yinjiao tribe's mountain was also full of preparations. Old Ku even set up many traps in front of the house. I heard that many birds will come. Let's make sure they don't return. Caesar helped from the side, but he still looked in the direction of the bat leader from time to time. His eyes were full of vigilance. Very quickly, another 2 days passed. Early in the morning, Shao Xian informed Ao and the others, get ready. The 1,000-grain gold will ripen today. It should be around noon. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the Yinjiao tribe became more solemn. Shao Xian stood next to the 1,000-grain gold, looking at the golden plants. This time, the 1,000-grain gold plants were taller than the ones on the other side of the sea. There were more grains on each plant. The heavy grains swayed slightly in the wind, shining with a golden light. A wooden stick stood on the ground, its shadow getting shorter and shorter. In the distance, some birds flew over from the forest. As the 1,000-grain gold plants ripened, there were fewer insects. Many of their natural enemies had come. Some birds were omnivores. They ate grains and insects. They definitely didn't have anything to do with the insects. If there were only 2 or 3 birds, there was no need to panic. But what if there was a large flock? Shao Xian whistled. 2 hurried whistles sounded. The people who heard the signal reacted immediately. The wanderers who had been told to stay in the house quietly heard the flapping of wings outside. Some people curiously looked out of the closed wooden door. Birds of all sizes were resting outside their door. From the sound of it, there were more birds around. Some people wanted to go out and catch one, but when they heard the whistle, they quickly blocked the door and closed the window. They looked out through the gap. More and more birds were landing. There were even birds fighting outside. In the sky, Wu He and the others looked down from the back of the long-winged bird. What's happening? What's happening? So many. Because they were flying high, they could see more clearly. In their field of vision, from the forest, flocks of birds were flying towards Yanjiao. To be exact, they were flying towards Yanjiao's farmland. Perhaps their target was the golden land that Yanjiao was guarding. The long-winged birds they enslaved were purely carnivorous, not vegetarian at all. They never ate grains, so they weren't very interested in the crops in the Flaming Horns fields. Perhaps they noticed something special about the crops in the Flaming Horns fields, but they weren't as crazy as the birds that flew here one after another. It must be something special, someone said excitedly. His eyes were burning. I heard that some Yanjiao people once appeared in the golden grain fields outside the royal city. Ji-ju of the golden grain fields gave them some gifts, Wu He said. Wu He had asked around and learned some things that surprised him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have set Yanjiao as his first target after crossing the sea. Hearing this, the others' eyes became even more heated. Could it be that the land below was planted with the seeds from Ji-ju of the golden grain fields? Maybe it's something that was secretly planted in the golden grain fields? Good. We didn't come here in vain. Chang Lu and the others couldn't help but rub their hands together. They couldn't wait to go over and sweep everything clean. What kind of place was the golden grain fields? It was the land of the famous Ji-ju. The grains that were produced there were important to the nobles of the royal city. The guards there were carefully selected. They weren't ordinary guards in the royal city. Among the fields outside the royal city, the golden grain fields were the most difficult to enter. If you tried to force your way in or sneak in, it was very likely that you wouldn't be able to leave. Not even a complete corpse would be left behind. Everything would be turned into fertilizer. But Yanjiao was different. It definitely wasn't as heavily guarded as the golden grain fields. Opportunity. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect such a harvest this time. Do you see those flocks of birds? Wu He pointed at the birds that were approaching the Yanjiao tribe. He said to the others, let's take advantage of the moment when those birds are causing trouble for Yanjiao. Do we need you to tell us that? With those birds around, they could reduce their presence and take advantage of the opportunity to harvest more. However, unlike the Changlis, the 7 long-winged birds were all nervous. When they looked at the flocks of birds flying towards Yanjiao, their eyes were filled with pity. Xiao Xian stared intently at the 1,000 grain fields in front of him. There were soldiers holding sickles and other harvesting tools at every corner of the fields. They were waiting for Xiao Xian to give the order to start harvesting. Chapter 689. The wind carried with it the fragrance of the grains. Those with a good sense of smell would notice that as time passed, the fragrance of the grains in the air grew thicker. More and more birds flew over. Some of them had already started pecking at the fields nearby, but they were quickly caught and killed by the guards. The people from the other side of the sea had experienced the harvest of the 1,000 grain gold and were already mentally prepared. But the others were different. Although they had been told a few days ago about the possibility of this happening, it was not as intense as witnessing it with their own eyes. Especially the drumming tribesmen who came to help. They were still puzzled. It was just harvesting grains. Was there a need to mobilize so many people? Now, as they looked at the dense flock of birds gathering around them, they felt their scalps twitch. Thank goodness we didn't farm. The drumming tribesmen all thought at the same time. Whether it was the wanderers hiding in the caves or the Yanjiao tribesmen on the mountain, they all saw the birds flapping their wings outside the house. Although most of them were not fearsome beasts, there were too many of them. They were everywhere outside. Old Ku heard the sounds of the traps he set outside, accompanied by the chirping of the birds. Caesar and the other fearsome beasts were busy at the top and bottom of the mountain. Soon, their mouths were full of bird feathers. But the strange thing was, the flock of birds only flew around the edges of the fields. They did not come close to the center of the 1,000-grain gold field. This scene was especially obvious when looking down from the sky. Why don't the birds fly over there? Wu He looked at the situation below and asked his 6 companions. They know that it's the most dangerous place. After all, the Yinjiao tribesmen guarding there are the strongest in the fields. I heard that the Yinjiao tribesmen often hunt fearsome beasts. They must have a strong killing intent. Maybe the birds have sensed it too, one of them guessed. No, I feel that there must be something there that can make those birds afraid. Another person expressed his different opinion. Something dangerous, the first person sneered. Are you talking about a king beast? If there was a king beast there wouldn't be so many Yinjiao tribesmen. It can't be a king beast. Wu He agreed. He had personally experienced the king beast incident and knew that the rumors were not as exaggerated as they seemed. The Yinjiao tribesmen would not send so many people to guard a place where a king beast appeared. Then, what could be the reason? The others did not understand. Maybe the Yinjiao tribesmen made some medicine to repel the birds, someone suddenly said. The others paused. Thinking about it this way, it was really possible. Speaking of which, none of the fearsome beasts that the Yinjiao tamed are here. Wu He scanned the area again. He found out that the giant mountain eagle that chased after them only flew between the forest and the trading point. At most, it went to the mountain in the core residential area of the Flaming Horn tribe. It didn't fly to the Flaming Horn's farmlands even once. That has to be it. Thinking about it this way, the others felt that this should be the closest to the truth. They knew that in the fields of some slave owners, there were times when they would use some medicine to expel pests and birds, but those prescriptions had always been in the hands of very few people and would not be easily spread out. If the Yinjiao tribe could get the seeds from Jeju, then perhaps they also had the medicine to repel the insects? No wonder the long-winged birds don't want to go near that place. Wu He nodded. He agreed with that guess. Fortunately, the long-winged birds were their beast slaves. Even if they were unwilling, they would do as they were told. They just had to be careful when the time came. The medicine was only effective against insects, so it shouldn't have much of an effect on humans. Come, take some medicine first. One person took out a small wooden bottle from the cloth bag he carried with him. After opening it, he distributed the pills to the others. These pills were not specific to any particular medicine, but they could serve as a buffer. Even if they were poisoned, as long as they were treated in time, they would be fine. They were just going to steal a handful of grains. They weren't going to eat poison, so they would be fine. Quick, get ready. I feel that the Yinjiao people are about to make a move. Wu He said. When the others heard this, they quickly gathered their thoughts and focused on what was happening below. In the 1,000-grain gold field, Xiao Xian quickly glanced to the left. It looked peaceful, but no one dared to go near it. There wasn't even a flying insect. There was a big bat there. It had been resting on the mountain 2 days ago, but since last night, the bat leader had been in the field. Even during the day, which it hated, it didn't leave the field. However, it no longer hung on the tallest leaves. Instead, it was hanging on the lower leaves of the 1,000-grain gold plants. Because every 1,000-grain gold plant was very big, the leaves on the top spread out. Even if they were long and narrow, when there were so many of them, they could cover some of Yang Guang's vision. The bat leader hung in the shadows. If one didn't see it resting there with their own eyes, as long as they didn't look in that direction, it would be hard to notice its presence. At least, the guards outside the 1,000-grain gold field didn't notice anything strange. Patter, patter, on the heavy grain ears, grape-sized grains of the 1,000-grain gold swayed and collided with each other. The grains didn't have any obvious changes on the outside, but on the inside, they were slowly maturing. Xiao Xian's eyes flashed. He suddenly blew the wooden whistle in his mouth. The slightly long whistle wasn't loud. Instead, it sounded calm. But after this whistle, the air seemed to tighten. The atmosphere became tense and stagnant. This was the whistle for everyone to get ready. Whoosh! A sharp and hurried whistle followed. It was like the sound of a starting gun. The people who were waiting in all directions instantly shot out like arrows, leaving the bow, heading straight for the valley that had been allocated beforehand. This was indeed more like a battle where every second mattered. The scythe made of animal bones easily cut through the tall stalks of 1,000-grain gold. The people behind him quickly collected the 1,000-grain gold and put them into large bags made of animal skin. Because there were too many 1,000-grain gold planted this time, the survival rate was much higher than the first time. Therefore, they didn't have time to cut the grains individually. They cut them all together. After they were done, they would find a place to deal with them. Otherwise, the surrounding birds would cause a lot of trouble. Everyone's assigned area and route had been planned beforehand. They wouldn't bump into each other while cutting, and they wouldn't take the same route. They would try their best to save as much time as possible. Except for one place. Xiao Xian didn't let anyone near the bat leader's area. That was the biggest variable. As long as they didn't provoke it, the harvest could be completed smoothly. If someone accidentally went over and provoked the bat leader, it would be more troublesome than being attacked by a flock of birds. At the same time, the surrounding flocks of birds that didn't dare to come near seemed to be fighting for their lives. They screeched and rushed over. Looking down from the sky, they could see a flock of birds forming an encirclement. They were closing in on Yinjiao's most heavily guarded field. This is our chance. Wu He and the others were excited. The blood in their bodies seemed to boil. Under the insistence of Wu He and the others, the long-winged bird could only reluctantly make a coo sound and then slowly fly towards that direction. As the flock of birds neared, the bat leader, hidden in the shadows of the 1,000-grain gold valley, opened its blood-red eyes. Whoosh, the wings wrapped around its body spread open. There was a slight sound of wind. In such a noisy environment, the sound of the wind didn't even cause a ripple. No one would hear it. But the moment it spread its wings, the flock of birds that were closing in on it suddenly stopped. It was as if someone had pressed the pause button. A strong, murderous aura came out of the 1,000-grain gold, especially in the air. The aura was directed at the birds that were flying close to it. The Yinjiao warriors who were busy harvesting the 1,000-grain gold valley were shocked by this sudden aura. The scythes in their hands almost fell out of their hands. A beast. After hunting for so many times, they could naturally tell whether it was a human or a beast. No, this wasn't a normal beast. This was much stronger than the beasts they had seen before. The air was thick with the smell of blood. There wasn't a drop of blood in sight, nor was there any smell of blood. But it felt like they were in a bloody fog. At this moment, all the shouts, arrows, horns, bones, metal, and birdsong seemed to have been frightened and came to an abrupt end. Hiss, the sound was like the sound of air rushing past. It wasn't loud, but everyone in the field heard it. This voice made everyone's hair stand on end. It was as if there was a bloody Fong that was ready to move, a massacre about to happen. Under the noontime Yangguang, the field seemed to be cut off from Yangguang. They couldn't feel the slightest bit of warmth. There was only a chill that made them shiver, and their teeth chattered. In the air, Wu He and the others were still far away, but they could feel the strange aura. Wu He shuddered and almost fell off his long-winged bird. Not only the 7 of them, but the 7 long-winged birds also stopped flying forward like the other birds. If it weren't for their masters wanting to go over, they would have retreated a long time ago. The rhythm of their flapping wings also became chaotic, so much so that they rose and fell, almost causing the frightened people to fall off their backs. "WWW, what is that?" One of them stuttered. They had been through a lot. Even if they didn't have the ability to distinguish auras like the Yinjiao, they could still sense that there was a dangerous creature there. They just didn't know if it was a human or a beast. Why do I have a bad premonition? Another person said. What's there? A human? Or a beast? Could it really be a king beast? Impossible. Wu He immediately denied it. Then he said with uncertainty, it shouldn't be. It definitely isn't the one that appeared last time. If it wasn't a king beast, then what was the source of that powerful aura? What secrets were the Yinjiao hiding? The Yinjiao are really cunning. Someone said through gritted teeth. The others felt the same way. The Yinjiao had a lot of secrets, but they didn't dare to rashly investigate. What do we do? The other 6 looked to Wu He. Wu He's words sometimes made people want to beat him up, but some of his decisions were right. At times like this, they believed in Wu He's decision. Wu He solemnly looked down and said, continue to wait. Those birds won't give up so easily. As long as they keep moving, then what Yinjiao is hiding is definitely not a king beast. Even if there were tempting food in the area where a king beast appeared, normal beasts and ferocious beasts wouldn't dare to approach. However, the birds stopped for a moment, then began to pace back and forth, as if preparing for another attack. No. It really isn't a king beast. The person next to Wu He was overjoyed. For them, as long as it wasn't a king beast, then it was worth the risk. If it was a king beast, then they would leave without another word. No matter what secrets Yinjiao had, no matter what treasures there were, they would leave immediately. Just like when the king's stoneworm appeared in the forest outside the trading point, Wu He threw down his cup and left. They would do the same. But there was no king beast now, right? So what if it was risky? They had taken more risks since they were young than the grains they ate. The 7 of them once again paid attention to the situation below, waiting for the movements of the birds to decide when to make their move. In the 1,000-grain gold field, the soldiers harvesting the crops had paused when the powerful aura appeared. However, Xiao Xian quickly reminded them to return to their task. No matter what danger there was, as long as the Great Elder was here, everything would be fine. After the incident with the king beast, the people of Yinjiao trusted Xiao Xian very much. Even if something happened, they wouldn't blame Xiao Xian. The Great Elder's motive was always for Yinjiao's good. Xian, those birds are flying over again. Ao pulled his bow and aimed an arrow at the sky. The flock of birds was too large. Even someone with good archery skills couldn't face such a large number of birds calmly. Wait. Don't shoot for now. Pay attention to that side. Xiao Xian pointed his chin in the direction of the bat leader. The bat leader was starting to get angry. That was just a warning. After all, it was daytime and it didn't like to go out in the day. Flying beasts didn't like bows and arrows. Forget about the other fields, it was better not to shoot at the 1,000-grain gold field and the surrounding fields. After all, the bat leader might fly out at any time. If someone accidentally shot and angered the bat leader, this already busy harvest operation would be even more difficult to succeed. Ao thought about it and agreed. He put down his bow and focused on the bat leader's position. He and Xiao Xian didn't participate in the harvest operation directly. Instead, they stared at the bat leader. After all, no one knew what the bat leader was going to do. If something happened, they would be able to react immediately. In times of danger, those with high status and power would definitely be the ones to take the lead. The smell of blood in the air was getting thicker and thicker. If it wasn't for the valley around them, everyone would have thought that they were in a killing field. Some of the warriors' arms were shaking as they waved their sickles. This wasn't because they were timid. It was a psychological and physiological reaction. They were nervous. Under such strong pressure, they could still maintain their normal harvesting and not pull out their sickles to defend themselves. This was already very good. The speed of the flock of birds slowed down. Some birds started to retreat, some hesitated, and some continued to approach boldly, heading straight for the swaying golden grains. The birds that approached didn't immediately rush down even when they were above the 1,000-grain gold field. However, these birds that had gathered gradually blocked Yang Guang from above. Just as the flock of birds above finally decided to swoop down, and the surrounding birds that were watching also spread their wings and prepared to shoot down. Whoosh! A black shadow flew out from the shadows of the valley, brushing past the golden grains and heading up. As it rushed up, invisible and inaudible sound waves were emitted. Bang! 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 The closest flying bird was directly turned into a cloud of blood mist. It didn't even have the time to let out a final cry of shock. When that figure charged towards the densest flock of birds, a blood-red color, accompanied by a series of explosions, spread out in the air like a crimson disk. The flock of birds that blocked Yang Guang's view was replaced by a bloody mist. Under Yang Guang's gaze, the mist spread out and landed on the field. If before, it was only because of the strong aura that made people feel like they could smell blood, then now, it was real blood. The people harvesting below, whether they were on the 1,000-grain gold field or the other fields nearby, the drumming warriors who came to help, the sentries on the watchtowers, etc., all saw the horrifying scene above the field. The bat leader's attack was only aimed at the flock of birds, but the people harvesting in the field were also affected. They had to stop what they were doing and cover their ears, feeling like their heads were being pierced by thousands of needles. Those who were further away were better off, but those who were closer to the 1,000-grain gold fields suffered the most. However, they were the strongest among the people in charge of harvesting. As long as the bat leader didn't target them, they could still handle it. They just felt uncomfortable. Ao clenched his bow tightly and looked up. He didn't care about the bloody mist falling on the ground, only focused on the battle above. No, it couldn't be called a battle. It was a one-sided massacre. A flock of birds lured by food and an enraged half-king beast. It was obvious who was stronger. There was a heavy grain hanging from Xiao Xian's head. The bloody mist from above covered the grains in a layer of red. Xiao Xian plucked a grain and wiped away the layer of blood on it with his finger, revealing the golden shell underneath. The 1,000-grain gold shell seemed to shine even brighter. Xiao Xian thought back to when he first found the nutrients needed for the growth of the 1,000-grain gold. He looked at the golden grain in his hand. Perhaps the growth and ripening of the 1,000-grain gold was destined to be accompanied by blood. This was a golden light born from blood. In the sky, the explosions no longer continued, but the bat leader did not seem to intend to let go of the birds that had angered it. It still did not stop chasing them, but this time it used its sharp claws and fangs. After the bloody mist, there would always be some shredded bird corpses. Some of the bird corpses were so shriveled that there wasn't even a drop of blood left. Some of them were even incomplete. It was obvious that the bat above was very cruel. The flock of birds seemed to have been woken up and scattered in all directions. Of course, there were still some bold ones. While the bat leader was chasing other birds, they went to the 1,000-grain gold field, thinking that they could achieve their goal. Unfortunately, the Yinjiao people were already there. The harvesting continued. The people in the sky and on the ground were also busy. Wu He and the others, who had been avoiding the bat leader's attack, saw their chance to attack. The Yinjiao people and the terrifying bat didn't notice them. Chance. Go. Quick, quick, quick. Grab a handful before the grains are all gone. Chapter 690. The tense atmosphere at the Yinjiao plantation didn't affect the other side of the flaming river. Even though they couldn't see the Yinjiao plantation from the flaming river, they could still see the strange movements in the sky. The flock of birds there was too eye-catching. Some people who came to see the flaming river bridge were arguing with the Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge. They came all the way here just to take a look at the bridge and personally experience what it felt like to be built by a king beast. However, the Yinjiao people didn't let them pass. If they didn't let them get on the bridge, what was the point of coming all the way here? Threats and promises were useless to the Yinjiao soldiers guarding the bridge. No matter what you said, their attitude was firm. As long as you weren't a Yinjiao, you weren't allowed to take a single step onto the bridge. Even though the soldiers guarding the bridge didn't stay at the headquarters to participate in the harvest, they knew that no outsiders were allowed to disturb them. These people said they were going to take a look at the bridge, but who knew if they would run straight to the Yanjiao headquarters? Their chief had already said this morning that no one who wasn't a Yanjiao was allowed to take a single step forward. More and more people from other tribes gathered around. The leader of the expedition team looked at the people behind him, then looked at the Yanjiao soldiers guarding the bridge. In terms of numbers, they had already outnumbered the Yanjiao soldiers. Why don't we just use force? From time to time, there were some noises from the crowd, increasing the tension in the air. You think you can stop us? If you don't let me see, then I'm going to see. The crowd pushed forward and the people in front couldn't help but take 2 steps forward. The Yanjiao soldiers guarding the bridge immediately pointed their blades and spears at them. Most of the people in the expedition team weren't good people. They were already very impatient when the Yanjiao people didn't let them onto the bridge. They didn't believe in the exaggerated rumors about the Yanjiao people. Other than coming here to see the legendary bridge, they also wanted to test how capable the Yanjiao people were. Everything was just 1 step away, and the push from behind just now had become the trigger for the situation to explode. Just as the chaos was about to erupt, a loud bang suddenly came from above Yanjiao's headquarters. When they looked up, they saw a bloody explosion in the sky. The bloody scene extinguished the flames of anger in their hearts, and they all stopped what they were doing. Even the Yanjiao soldiers guarding the bridge turned their heads to look. They didn't know what had happened over there, but from the looks of it, it should be something good. After all, those that had exploded into a bloody mist were the flock of birds that had come to snatch the grains. What is that? Someone asked in a trembling voice. I don't know. I heard that it's the territory of the Yanjiao tribe. What happened in Yanjiao? I keep having the feeling that there's something scary over there. The person who spoke even shuddered. He wasn't the only one. Everyone else had the same feeling. After all, those who could join the expedition team and reach here safely were definitely not weak. The people who gathered around stopped clamoring to get on the bridge. Yanjiao seemed to be very dangerous, so they decided to observe the situation first. The guards looked at the headquarters worriedly. From here, they could only see the mountains at the headquarters and the surrounding forest. They couldn't see what was happening in the fields, so they couldn't leave. They could only pray in their hearts that everything would go smoothly over there. At the back of the crowd, a few people exchanged glances. They saw the surprise in each other's eyes, and they changed their plans at the last minute. Like the Changlis, they also came from the other side of the sea, but they weren't as fast as the Changlis. They originally planned to use these curious people to distract the Yanjiao guards so that they could sneak in with the others and take a look at the Yanjiao tribe. They didn't expect that it would be so dangerous over there. I heard that the Changlis already sent people over there, someone said in a low voice. The others exchanged glances with each other. Everyone knew what was going on. Looking for trouble and looting a burning house was what the Changlis did all the time. With the Changlis here, Yanjiao definitely wouldn't be peaceful. They should wait and observe for a while. They didn't want to meet the Changlis. On the other side of the bridge, Ta personally led a group of people to guard this side. If the people on the other side couldn't hold on, he would still be here. They definitely couldn't let those people come over today. Recently, because of the Flaming River Bridge, more people came to the Flaming River trading point. These people were also bolder. Some even wanted to test Yanjiao directly. How troublesome. The mission here was also very important, but Ta was also worried about the fields. Perhaps the others didn't know, but as one of the 2 leaders of Yanjiao, Ta knew about the bat leader. Because of this, he was even more worried. At the same time, above Yanjiao's fields, the bloody mist gradually dissipated. The surroundings were filled with broken feathers and bone fragments. The birds were either shot down, killed, or sucked dry. Their corpses fell to the ground one after another. While the Flaming Horn tribesmen were busy dealing with the stealing birds and the bat leader was chasing after the birds, two shadows suddenly dashed towards the Flaming Horn's farmland. They were running towards the 1,000-grain gold. "Watch out! Be careful!" the person who shot the birds shouted when he noticed the intruders in the air. Just as the Flaming Horn tribesmen drew their bows, a large black shield opened up above the figure that flew past them. The shield spun rapidly. This was the Chang'li's shield made of gum. It was much lighter than metal and stone. They usually disassembled this shield into multiple pieces and only put it back together before a mission. The person behind the shield started to transform. Totem patterns appeared on his face and arms. Especially the arm that was holding the shield, it immediately swelled up. His muscles tightened, and green veins protruded. He held the two black shields firmly in each hand. The two people holding the shields were indescribably excited. Every time they were on a mission, they would feel this way. This kind of tense and exciting atmosphere made them so excited that they couldn't help but shout. "Tuck, tuck, tuck." The arrows were blocked by the black shield. The arrowheads pierced into the shield, but they didn't bounce back or pierce through. They were stuck there. In order to save arrowheads, the Yanjiao people used wooden arrowheads when shooting ordinary birds. For larger birds, they used stone arrowheads. Only birds like ferocious beasts would use metal arrowheads. The Chang'li's people came so suddenly that the people holding the bows didn't have time to change the arrowheads. Therefore, the first batch of arrows were all made of wood. The arrowheads were stuck on the two black shields. There were also people who used stone arrowheads in order to shoot down the larger birds. In that instant, they also attacked, but the arrows they shot out were also unable to break through the strange black shield. They were also stuck on the shield, neither bounced off nor penetrated. The two figures holding the black shields became like hedgehogs in an instant. However, they didn't really hurt the people and birds behind the shields. Ao also intended to attack, but he saw another figure further away in that direction. The bat leader was sucking the blood of a ferocious bird. If he attacked, if he missed the target, the spear was likely to go directly to the bat leader. If he angered the bat leader, would it change its target to people on his side? However, because of that little bit of hesitation, Ao lost the chance to hit the target. It was very difficult for him to hit the target again. The chance was gone in a flash. Just as the two people behind the black shield were feeling complacent, a long spear with a green tip pierced through the air towards one of the shadows. The cyan spearhead fiercely stabbed into the black shield. The sharp tip of the blade pierced through the shield, and a part of the impact spread along the shield during the collision. The dense number of arrows stuck on the black shield were instantly shattered. Apart from the arrowheads that were still stuck on the shield, many of the arrowheads had already been shattered, and scattered. The spear that pierced the black shield didn't stop moving forward. The strong impact continued to push the spear forward and break the shield. At that moment, the person behind the black shield felt as if time had stopped. His pupils shrank because of the sudden shock. He could even hear the sound of friction between the spear and the shield. The place where the shield was broken seemed to be scorched by the high temperature. If the shield was of any other color, there might be a circle of scorch marks on the place where the spear broke through. There seemed to be a burning air entering his nose. The person behind the shield saw the blue spear that reflected the cold light getting closer and closer to him. He didn't even have time to react. It was too late. He didn't think. Fortunately, the spear brushed past his forehead in the end. At the same time, his hands that were holding the black shield, under the impact of the spear, seemed to have been attacked by the claws of a ferocious beast. Lacerations appeared on his hands, extending from the web between his thumb and index finger to the top of his arms. Blood spurted out from these wounds like arrows of blood. His whole body was also brought back and fell off the back of the long-winged bird. The hands that were holding the two black shields also loosened. The long-winged bird below him also lost its balance. It rolled down a few times before flying away in panic. It didn't stop even after taking an arrow to the butt. And the person who fell off the back of the long-winged bird was caught by his companion in the next moment and carried to the back of another long-winged bird. The person who was rescued stared blankly at the arm in his hand, then looked at the spear that fell with the shield. He couldn't help but swallow a few times. Just now, both of his arms were almost shaken off. What terrifying strength! And because they wanted to save him, the person who originally planned to create a diversion was exposed in advance. There's still someone else. They still have companions. However, just as everyone's attention was on the two people who came later, two more figures rushed in when no one was paying attention. They didn't directly rush into the center, but at the border, through the gaps exposed by the guards, they quickly flashed past. As they flew past, the person on the long-winged bird's back shook his arms. His originally normal arms shrunk in an instant, becoming as small as a child's. His sleeves fluttered in the wind, outlining the clear outline of his arm bones. He swung his arms slightly, and as the long-winged bird flew past, his outstretched fingers became as slender as hooks. He grabbed at the air, and with a flick of his arm, he scooped up a bag full of 1,000-grain gold that was held by a Yanjiao warrior. The place where the Yanjiao warrior had grabbed the bag was cut open, leaving only a piece of animal skin in his hand. The bag was taken away. After the attack, the person pulled up. The Yanjiao warrior didn't have time to do anything else. He could only watch as the person left. Some 1,000-grain gold still fell from the opening of the animal skin bag that wasn't tied tightly. The same thing happened in another part of the 1,000-grain gold field. Someone suddenly came in and took away a bag of 1,000-grain gold. The bag was full and tied up, but they didn't have time to move it to the warehouse. Now, it was taken away by a sneak attack. The two of them smirked proudly. If it weren't for the Flaming Horn's tight security, they would have been able to steal even more. However, they probably wouldn't have another chance after this, so they had no choice but to retreat. Let's go. Coo! There was a bird call in the air, and the intruders all retreated. As they left, they let out strange cries, like the cry of a victor after a battle. All of this happened in the span of a few breaths. Ao's expression changed when he saw this. His expression was ferocious, even ruthless. It was obvious that these people worked very well together. They made full use of each other's strengths and weaknesses, using each other's strengths to make up for their weaknesses. If they weren't still in the Flaming Horn's territory and needed to continue working together, they would have immediately flown in different directions. And once they left Yanjiao territory, even if Xiao Xian called Cha-Cha back to continue chasing, they wouldn't be able to catch up. After all, there were 7 of them, 7 birds. Ao was about to give chase, but Xiao Xian stopped him. You stay here, I'll go. Between Ao and Xiao Xian, one of them had to stay behind. After all, the harvest wasn't over yet, and there might be other variables. Someone had to stay here to watch over things. After hearing Xiao Xian's words, Ao reluctantly stopped. After all, it was useless for him to chase after them. Xiao Xian could still get Cha-Cha to help. After saying that, Xiao Xian flew in the direction of the figures in the sky. Wu He looked at the 2 bags of fruit in his hands, his face full of pride. Yanjiao, that's all there is to it. Exciting. Haha. Did you see the faces of those Yanjiao people? I didn't see it, but it definitely won't be good. Ha ha ha. My arm was almost crippled, but it's good that we got it. I didn't see those Yanjiao people's faces, but I'm sure they'll look like they've been smashed with bird poop. Hee hee. Hey, don't be so happy yet. There's someone chasing after us. Someone beside Wu He interrupted the laughter of the others. Wu He looked down. There weren't many trees here, and he could see the person running through the trees. Seeing that the person was running so fast, and the distance between them was quickly closing, Wu He's eyes flashed with surprise. However, he didn't stop smiling. Instead, he said with some interest, "That's Yanjiao's great elder." What, that's the kid? Isn't Yanjiao's great elder an old man? Someone didn't understand. Most of the elders they had seen before were middle-aged and elderly. Don't worry about him. That kid can't fly. Wu He didn't care. Chapter 691. After Xiao Xian chased after those people, the atmosphere in the field became heavy. They were too careless. If they had been more cautious, perhaps none of this would have happened. At least, those people wouldn't have been able to escape so easily. Ao was filled with regret now. Even though Xiao Xian had warned them that there were others watching them and they had been on guard, after the bat leader showed its might, they thought that no one would dare to come close. Who knew that those people would be so bold? They were crazy. Weren't they afraid of being targeted by the bat leader? Wasn't the explosion of those birds a lesson? But it had already happened, and it had happened in an extremely humiliating way. 2 bags of 1,000-grain gold had been stolen in front of everyone. It was like a slap to the Yinjiao people's faces, a vicious slap. The Yinjiao people present were stunned. Although the 2 bags of 1,000-grain gold were not even 1/10 of the total harvest, this was a different matter. It was a failure for the hunters to have their prey stolen, let alone the 1,000-grain gold that they had been taking care of for so long. Perhaps the trading point, the king beasts, the flaming river bridge and other things had made the Yinjiao people arrogant. They were no longer as vigilant and cautious as they should have been. This was a big mistake. Even Ao himself had to admit that he had been in a bad mood recently, especially when he hadn't thrown the spear decisively. If he had cooperated with Xiao Xian and thrown the spear, even if they still couldn't change the outcome of the stolen grains, at least 1 or 2 people would have been left behind. He looked up at the sky again. The bat leader was killing even more savagely. It probably knew what was happening below, but it didn't chase after them. If it did, it would have to give up on this more important place. It could only guard here. It wasn't a tamed beast, so it wouldn't be as obedient as a cha-cha. Its goal was different from the Yinjiao people. It would be angry if something was stolen from under its nose, but it wouldn't chase after those who stole the grains. It knew how to weigh the pros and cons. It would only guard the more important place. Relying too much on external forces was not good. Ao sighed inwardly. The timing of those people's appearance was too good. If they had been a moment earlier or a moment later, they might have failed. Perhaps they had also considered the attitude of the bat leader and the craziness of those people. He had thought that only a bandit was capable of such a feat, but who would have thought that there were others as well? The robbers liked to appear at night, but these people were at noon, under the scorching sun, under the watchful eyes of everyone. Ao felt that compared to the theft, this slap was even more painful. Of course, now was not the time to blame himself. There was no time to reflect. Keep your spirits up, all of you. It's not over yet. Ao roared. So what if he was unwilling? It was better to settle the matter at hand first. This time, he would treat it as a lesson. Ao didn't think that Xiao Xian would be able to stop all of them. Looking at their actions and cooperation, he knew that they were all veterans. Cha-Cha alone wouldn't be able to stop all of them. At the side of the flaming river bridge, Ta turned to look at the sky. 7 figures flew past the forest not far away. They probably knew that there were people guarding this area, so they didn't approach. Instead, they continued to fly upstream. Although they were a little far away, with Ta's eyesight, he could still roughly see them. He looked at the familiar animal skin bag, then at the plants that fell from time to time. He couldn't hold back his anger anymore. Someone actually stole the 1,000-grain gold. Ta also noticed Xiao Xian's tracks. Xiao Xian was chasing after those people. He moved his feet. He wanted to chase after them personally, but when he saw the people on the other side, he paused. He raised his hand and pointed at the people beside him. You guys follow them and see. The foreign tribesmen on the other side of the flaming river couldn't see what was going on because they were further away. They were still discussing what was going on. But soon, they saw it. On the other side of the river, where the Yinjiao headquarters were, there were people riding birds in the sky. It looked like they were planning to cross the river. The people behind the crowd saw this and understood. Weren't those the Changlis? From the looks of it, did they succeed? To be able to steal from Yanjiao's headquarters, the Changlis were indeed powerful. If that was the case, Yanjiao could only admit defeat. In the sky, after Wu He's group of 7 snatched the 2 big bags of grains, 2 of the long-winged birds were severely injured and their flight was affected. They were also carrying arrows. The other 2 long-winged birds carrying the animal skin bags couldn't fly high because of the heavy load. Flying high took a lot of energy. Wu He's group also had a severely injured person. The long-winged birds were even more tired because they were carrying 2 people at the same time. Although the snatching was short, it took a lot of energy. Especially the 7 long-winged birds. They were under a lot of pressure. Even if the giant bat wasn't a king beast, it was more of a threat to them than the king stoneworm because bats could fly. They had finally completed the mission under a lot of pressure. Now that they relaxed, they felt very tired. To conserve energy and for the 7 of them to work together better, the 7 birds didn't fly too high. Of course, that was only compared to their usual height. Even if they weren't high, it wasn't a height that the beasts on the ground could reach. They flew above the forest and maintained a certain distance from the canopy. This allowed them to conserve energy and avoid the threats on the trees. This was the height that many experienced birds liked. Cha-Cha also maintained this distance in the past. As long as they flew fast enough, the people on the ground wouldn't be able to hit them unless they were sharpshooters. They chose to fly upstream because there weren't many people on the flaming river. They definitely wouldn't fly upstream because they didn't want to enter the forest full of fearsome beasts. They had to cross the river. On the other side of the flaming river, the tribes weren't evenly distributed. This was what Wu He found out. He also knew that the Yanjiao people had gone downstream before. There must be more Yanjiao people downstream who were familiar with Yanjiao. If they flew there, they would be watched. But upstream was different. As long as they crossed the river, there would be fewer tribes upstream and fewer people watching them. That way, they could escape faster. We're already out of Yanjiao territory. If we continue forward, we'll be in the forest full of fearsome beasts. Let's cross the river. Wu He said. The others didn't object. They signaled for the long-winged birds to change direction and prepare to cross the river. Once we cross the river, we'll split up. Wu He said. Suddenly, his eyelids twitched. What's wrong? The others saw this and looked around nervously. They didn't see any suspicious flying objects in the sky. They didn't see the giant bat, because they didn't see the giant mountain eagle that they were supposed to meet either. But that kid was still following them closely. Anything out of the ordinary? Wu He asked. Other than that kid still following us, we don't see any other threats. The others looked around again and said with certainty. That's good. Wu He felt that he was probably overthinking things because he was too nervous. He didn't underestimate Xiao Xian. As the grand elder of the Yanjiao tribe, someone who could lure the king beast away, he must be special. However, the main reason why Wu He didn't think much of him was because Xiao Xian couldn't fly. Even the king beast that was causing a ruckus outside the flaming river trading point couldn't do anything to them in the air. Without the giant mountain eagle's help, what could the grand elder of Yanjiao do at a time like this? Not even a fart. Wu He poked his head out and looked at the people below who hadn't given up yet. He then looked at the flaming river that was getting closer and closer. The smile on his face grew wider and wider. They were already here and that guy didn't have an eagle to help him. There was no bridge here either. How was he going to cross the river? There were many big, vicious fish in the river. Let's see how you're going to catch up. The river was getting closer and closer. The 7 long-winged birds were no longer paying attention to the people below. Among the 7 of them, only Wu He was still staring at the people below. Just as the 7 long-winged birds were about to fly into the river, the people in the forest jumped out and jumped high into the air. Seeing this, Wu He couldn't help but laugh. You think you can fly just because you jump high? Do you think you can fly? But soon, Wu He couldn't laugh anymore. Whoosh! There was a sound like a strong gust of wind. A blazing flame rose from Xiao Xian's body. A strong gust of wind swept up from below. The wind fanned the fire and it soared into the sky. In the blink of an eye, the flames gathered together and formed a giant that suddenly stood up in the air. A strong sense of oppression seeped out and filled the air. The rapidly rotating gust of wind made the figure formed by the flames blurry. The flames that floated out of the giant's body didn't make it look strange. Instead, it made it look even more intimidating, like the mane of an angry beast. The 7 Changlis who were closest felt it the most. They had never felt such pressure before. Such a majestic aura seemed to be able to crush people. The flame giant was almost at the same level as them. They couldn't see its eyes, only its silhouette. But Wu He and the others had an illusion that the giant's eyes were staring at them. Wu He could only feel the bones in his body creaking. The other 6 people's faces also changed. Fear, panic, helplessness. Their fingers were trembling and they felt like they were about to suffocate. The 7 long-winged birds even forgot to flap their wings. Everything was out of their control. There was an unexpected obstacle. And just at the instant when they were stunned, the flame giant moved. It raised its palm and pressed down, as if it was swatting away flies, slapping over. The blazing gust of wind carried an irresistible force. It didn't give Wu He and the others any time to react. They could only watch as the giant palm slapped down. The people who were watching from the other side of the bridge gasped when they saw this scene. Their mouths were agape and their eyes were wide open. Their jaws were about to fall off. What the hell was that? They only saw a giant made of flames suddenly appear, and then, with a palm, those people in the air were slapped down. Just like that, it slapped them down. Chapter 692. With that slap, 5 of the 7 long-winged birds in the air fell to the ground. The other 2 weren't hit directly but were swept away by the force of the slap. They spun a few times in the air and barely managed to steady themselves before crashing into a tree. These 2 birds were lucky but the other 5 weren't so lucky. Although it was just flames, the force of the slap was real. When the flame giant's palm slapped towards them, it directly passed through their bodies. However, the force of the slap still carried a scorching air current, as if it wanted to burn them up, causing them to feel a burning pain. That was not a real flame, it was a fire seed flame that was activated by totemic power. It was similar to how some people would have flames on their skin when they activated their totemic power. Everyone could understand this, but the difference was that no one had ever created such a huge giant like Xiao Xian. This was not something they could understand. Perhaps only those who had participated in the Flaming River banquet would not be surprised by this. Many tribesmen were fearful of unfamiliar and seemingly powerful forces. The scene in front of them left them stunned for a long time. It wasn't until the flames on the other side gradually disappeared that they trembled as if they were frightened. The Yinjiao tribesmen guarding the bridgehead looked away. Others might not know what that was, but they knew very well. They couldn't help but sigh with pride, as expected of the head elder. Thinking of the trouble ahead, the Yinjiao tribesmen guarding the bridgehead immediately became serious. They looked at the foreign tribesmen who were causing a ruckus. The head elder's actions just now gave them confidence. They didn't need to think too much. They just needed to do what they were supposed to do. If they couldn't stop these people, the head elder and the others would naturally deal with them. Seeing the Yinjiao tribesman guarding the bridgehead looking at them, the one who caused the ruckus earlier changed his expression and forced out a laugh. Haha. He then turned and left. What a joke, they didn't want to go over and get slapped. They didn't want to rush over and meet the same fate as those who had been slapped. What if that flame giant had targeted them? Seeing that the situation wasn't right, they gave up on the idea of rushing in. Although the Yinjiao tribesmen were different from the rumors, they were still quite fearsome. For the time being, they didn't want to directly confront Yanjiao. As for the probing they wanted to do before, whoever wanted to test him could go ahead. In any case, they did not intend to continue. Let's go to the Flaming River trading point and see if there's anything good there. Don't go back empty-handed. But boss, aren't we going to take a walk on the Flaming River Bridge? Someone asked. When the Yanjiao issue is resolved, there should be a chance. The Flaming River Bridge was secondary now. The most important thing was that their evaluation of Yanjiao had increased by another level. They knew what kind of attitude they should have towards different tribes. Since the troublemakers had left, the others were also scared and naturally wouldn't continue to stay here. The people at the back of the crowd glanced at the direction where the flame giant had appeared before they left. Since the Changle people had been beaten down, the Yanjiao people definitely wouldn't let them leave. They might even kill them and rob the Yanjiao people of their belongings. The Yanjiao people definitely wouldn't let them live. Fortunately, he didn't act rashly. The few of them looked at each other and saw the relief in each other's eyes. Forget it, it was better to observe for a while longer. They wouldn't go to the Yanjiao headquarters. They didn't want to follow in the footsteps of the Changle people. On the other side, Xiao Xian walked towards the 5 people who had been slapped down. 2 people had left in the sky. He didn't chase after them, nor did he use the bone ornament to summon the flame giant to stop them. The 5 Changle people and the 5 long-winged birds all felt terrible after being slapped down from the sky. Especially those who were already injured. Even though the one who was heavily injured was cushioned by the long-winged bird, he still fainted from the fall. The branches that had been broken by them struggled for a while before finally falling down. One of the Changle people who was groaning in pain was suffocating. His face was red and he seemed to want to cough, but he couldn't. He could only breathe with all his might. The muscles on his face were contorted from the pain. Wu He helped his companions who could still stand up. He looked at the approaching Xiao Xian cautiously. His gaze lingered on the green broadsword in Xiao Xian's hand for a while. The broadsword had a strong murderous aura. Even if it wasn't used to kill people, it must have slaughtered many ferocious beasts. Now, Xiao Xian's broadsword was pointed at them. Some of the people who had been slapped down had their legs broken. Some had even fainted. It was impossible for all of them to leave safely. Whoosh, 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 someone was quickly approaching from the forest. First Elder. The people sent by Ta to help had also arrived. Looking at the 5 strangers, a fierce light flashed in their eyes. They walked towards them with murderous intent. However, they didn't attack immediately. Instead, they looked at Xiao Xian and waited for Xiao Xian to speak. Tie them up, Xiao Xian said. Huh? The people who had already drawn their axes and were thinking about how to chop them up were stunned when they heard Xiao Xian's words. They didn't understand what Xiao Xian meant, so they asked, chop them up first, then tie them up. No. Keep them alive. Hearing Xiao Xian's words, Wu He and the others breathed a sigh of relief. They had already been injured when they were fighting for Yanjiao's grains. The slap and fall just now had added to their injuries. Even Wu He, who was slightly injured, couldn't perform at half of his usual level, let alone those who were seriously injured. However, the Yanjiao people were different. Not to mention Xiao Xian, who had slapped them down, had other tricks up his sleeve. Even the Yanjiao warriors who came later would have a hard time defending themselves. This was Yanjiao territory. Wu He and the others had planned to fight to the death, but when they heard Xiao Xian say to keep them alive, they were overjoyed. They didn't want to fight recklessly anymore. As long as they could survive, the 2 who left would definitely call for reinforcements. Why? The Yanjiao warriors who came over didn't understand why the First Elder wanted to keep these people alive. In the past, they would just kill them directly. They deserved to die, just like those who robbed them. Not to mention, these people stole the 1,000-grain gold that was highly valued by the tribe. It was even more unforgivable. They should be killed and used as fertilizer. If it was anyone else who said this, they would have already complained. However, it was Xiao Xian who said this. Even if they had different opinions, they would still follow Xiao Xian's orders. They didn't have any grievances. They believed that the first elder had his reasons for doing this. Knowing that Xiao Xian didn't want to kill them, Wu He and the others gave up resisting. They were worried that fighting would make the Yanjiao angry and change their minds. If they fell this time, then so be it. The most important thing was to stay alive. Only then would they have a chance to escape. Ta quickly came over with his men. He was still worried about this place. When he saw that the people who gathered on the other side of the bridge had already left, he only left a portion of his men behind and brought the rest to chase after them. Ta also didn't understand why Xiao Xian wanted to keep them alive. This wasn't Xiao Xian's style. He had never done this when he encountered robbers in the past. However, this wasn't the time to ask. He ordered his men to tie up the 5 annoying strangers with straw ropes. They even tied up the unconscious man and the 5 long-winged birds and brought them back. Most of the scattered 1,000-grain gold was picked up. A small portion was eaten by the birds and other animals in the forest. This made Ta even angrier. He wanted nothing more than to break the 5 men's necks. By the time Xiao Xian returned, the matter at the farmland had already been resolved. Seeing that Xiao Xian had recovered most of the lost grains and even captured the 5 robbers, Ao Yinzhao's mood was much better. However, he still couldn't figure out why Xiao Xian wanted to keep the 5 men alive. He was the one who wanted to kill them. When he heard that 2 of them had escaped, Ao began to worry again. He planned to go back and discuss a defensive strategy. Those people cooperated too well, and the timing was too good. Moreover, they were from the other side of the sea. They must have other accomplices. He had to be careful. Keeping them alive is still useful. Someone will come and ransom them, Xiao Xian said. What can they use to ransom them? Ao asked casually. Money? Yanjiao didn't lack that. Food? They didn't lack that either. Metal? Unless they brought over nuclear seeds, they wouldn't be interested in ordinary metal wares. Yanjiao's new bronze wares were better than most of the metal wares on the other side of the sea. Then what other deal could tempt Yanjiao? Ao couldn't figure it out. If it was just some money, he might as well kill these people to vent his anger. That would make him happy. I need them to do something, Xiao Xian said. Although Wu He was a bit far from them, he could tell what they were talking about from the movements of their mouths. Thus, he didn't need to hear. He could roughly guess what Xiao Xian and Ao were talking about just by looking. It wasn't complete, but he had a rough idea. Although he'd guessed that Xiao Xian had a use for them, or that he wanted to exchange them for something, he didn't expect that what they wanted wasn't money or anything else. That guy's goal seemed to be Chang'e, and not just the 5 of them. Wu He's heart skipped a beat when he thought about what had happened. Xiao Xian had slapped them down from the sky at the flaming river on purpose. He was using them to establish his authority. With Xiao Xian's speed, he could have slapped them down from the sky at any time, but he'd waited until they were near the river. At that time, there were many eyes on the other side of the river. They'd wanted more people to see how they were going to steal from Yanjiao territory. They hadn't expected things to turn out like this. They believed that those who saw that scene would temporarily restrain their restless thoughts. However, Wu He couldn't guess what Xiao Xian wanted the Chang'e people to do. Lock them up first. Xiao Xian pointed at Wu He and the others. Don't tie them up with straw ropes. Use chains. Straw ropes will make it easy for them to escape. Those who'd been thinking of ways to get rid of the straw ropes could only give up. The Yanjiao people had actually made these sturdy chains. After Wu He and the others were taken away, the farming stopped for the time being. Several Yanjiao executives gathered for a discussion. Wu He had already told them where they came from. Zheng Luo and the others had also heard of the Chang'e people. What else can the Chang'e people do besides cause trouble? Zheng Luo looked at Xiao Xian. Let them bring a letter to the other side of the sea. After all, we still have too few people. Zheng Luo didn't understand at first, but he quickly understood. His eyes lit up and he clenched his fist and pounded the stone table beside him. That's right, we really don't have enough people. Chapter 693. Zheng Luo and Xiao Xian were speaking in riddles. Ao and the rest couldn't understand them at all. However, Duo Kong seemed to have thought of something after Zheng Luo's words and his face lit up. You're saying that we should let the Chonglis send a message to the Taiha tribe? Should we persuade them to come over? Everyone understood after hearing Duo Kang's words. Even though Ao and the rest had never met the Taiha tribe before, they had heard of them. Their brothers from the other side of the sea had a lot to say about the Taiha tribe. What impressed Ao the most was that the Taiha people were good neighbors. Xiao Xian said that there were too few people. Everyone understood that as the popularity of the Flaming River trading point increased, the Yanjiao tribes were starting to feel powerless. The reason was that there weren't enough people and they didn't have enough manpower. They didn't have enough reliable helpers. Once the number of traveling parties increased, it would be a fierce battle. Fortunately, because of the King Beast and Xiao Xian's use of the Chonglis to establish their authority, the people who were harboring all kinds of thoughts stopped for a moment. However, this wasn't a long-term solution. They couldn't let children who had just learned to walk become warriors who could hunt and fight within a year. Increasing the population wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. As for reliable helpers, out of all the tribes that Yanjiao had contact with along the river, only the drumming tribe could be considered reliable. Even the rain tribe couldn't be considered as reliable. However, the drumming tribe didn't have many people. No matter how they thought about it, they were still lacking a lot of people. Now that Xiao Xian suggested this, everyone in the room was tempted. Even though the Taiha people aren't very likable at times, they're still trustworthy. Otherwise, we wouldn't have been neighbors with them for so many years. Plus, it was our ancestors who chose them in the first place, said Zheng Luo. They used to quarrel with the people of Taiha River, but those were just small fights. When there was a big problem, they would still work together, just like the salt mine incident. The salt mines had been abandoned because of the appearance of the salt beasts. With the salt beasts there, no one dared to dig in the salt mines. And without Yanjiao, the Taiha people's lives would be much more difficult. Back then, it was because of the Yanjiao that the two tribes joined forces. It was enough to make the other tribes in the forest not dare to make a move against them. But if it was only the Taiha tribe, it would not be much of a deterrent. It is indeed a good idea, but what if they are not willing to come? Ao asked. Explain the situation here clearly. They should be willing. Of course, it's still up to them to decide. Zheng Luo felt that the possibility of the Taiha people coming over was very high. The Taiha tribe had moved their nest a few times before. They did not have deep feelings for that piece of land. In terms of tribal interests, moving here was also beneficial for the Taiha tribe. After the disaster, Zheng Luo knew that the two continents were close. He wanted to go over and see the Taiha people and persuade them to move here. They could still be neighbors, but he knew that the slave masters on the other side of the sea were very vigilant against Yanjiao. The situation in the desert near the sea was very strange, so he could only give up. With the establishment of the Flaming River trading point, everyone was very busy and did not have time to travel. Now that Xiao Xian mentioned it, Zheng Luo saw an opportunity. The Changla people were the best people to send a letter. The people on the other side of the sea would definitely keep an eye on the Yanjiao people. If Yanjiao people went over, they would definitely capture them immediately. But what if it was the Changla people who went over? People on the other side of the sea would probably want to stay as far away as possible from this kind of annoying character. But, what if the Changla people don't want to? Also, how can we guarantee that the Changla people won't do anything else? This organization with a bad reputation was indeed worrisome. Although the Changla people are as annoying as the robbers, they are different in that they value teamwork. Xiao Xian said, the robbers work alone most of the time, but the Changla people are different. They work very well together. Also, when they appeared in the field, they were willing to expose themselves in advance to catch their fallen comrade. It's clear that they care about their own people. Also, I photographed 5 people. One of them was seriously injured and unconscious. One of them couldn't move because of his injured legs. Of the other 3, one had a broken arm and the other 2 only had minor injuries. They could have left immediately. I was the only one there, so the 3 of them had a high chance of escaping if they split up. But they didn't abandon their comrade who couldn't escape. So I thought that no matter if they were dead or alive, the Changla people would definitely come back. If they were alive, they could still negotiate with the Changla people. After listening to Xiao Xian's explanation, the others nodded. That was right. Ao was initially wary of the Changla people, but now he hoped that they would come quickly. That way, Xiao Xian's plan could be carried out. Then, let's prepare the letter to the Taiha people, Xiao Xian said. The others understood that no matter how close they were to the Taiha people, they had to show their sincerity. If only Zheng Luo and Duo Kong left a message in the letter, the Taiha people might not fully believe it. After all, Zheng Luo was no longer the leader, and Duo Kong was only one of the 2 leaders. After the discussion, Ao stopped Xiao Xian. The bat has left, but it took a bag of grains with it. It wasn't the biggest one, but a small one. After harvesting the 1,000-grain gold, the people quickly removed the grains from the ears and put them in other bags. The bags used to store the 1,000-grain gold were all big bags, but Xiao Xian asked them to use smaller ones. When Ao went to check at night, he found that a small bag was missing. The bag was about the size of a human head. There was an open window in the warehouse, and there were many people guarding outside. The bat was probably the only one who could sneak in and take the 1,000-grain gold away. Also, I didn't see it tonight. Is it still nearby? Ao asked. Not anymore. Xiao Xian didn't sense the bat leader's presence. It might have taken the bag of grains back to the Bat Mountain. Could it be that it was just helping us? It didn't take a lot of grains, Ao sighed. Xiao Xian glanced at him. You're thinking too much. It just thinks that these things belong to it, and we're just its little brothers collecting food for it. Why is it protecting the 1,000-grain gold? It considers the 1,000-grain gold as one of its favorite foods, and it doesn't allow other people or animals to get close. It's a typical behavior of an animal protecting its food. As for why it only took a small bag, it's because it's easier to move around. The big bag can't fly, and it's quite far from here to the Bat Mountain. Will it come back for the rest of the 1,000-grain gold? Ao asked. I don't know. We can check every day. If we eat the 1,000-grain gold, will it get angry? Ao was still worried. He didn't even dare to eat what he grew. It was so frustrating. Probably not. If it doesn't allow us to touch the 1,000-grain gold, it will threaten us. Beasts protect their food. They'd rather let their food rot than let unrelated people or animals take it away. At least for now, the bat leader didn't exclude the Yinjiao people as its own people. Then I'm relieved. After resolving his doubts, Ao finally relaxed. He began to prepare for the next step. He didn't know when the Changle's people would arrive. As for Wu He's group of 5 who were locked up in the cave, they were having a hard time. The soup was cold, the meat was cold and hard, and it tasted bad. There wasn't even any dry grass on the ground, let alone animal skins. Fortunately, it wasn't too cold yet, but the temperature at night was much lower than during the day. In a place like this, they couldn't eat or sleep well. They were indeed prisoners. But as long as they had food, it was fine. Wu He and the others didn't expect the Yinjiao to treat them well. They were just waiting for someone to come and ransom them. Wu He looked at the Yinjiao people not far away from him. They were the ones guarding them. Now, they were cooking the meat soup. The rich aroma was still hot, and it wafted through the cave. Wu He took a deep breath and felt even hungrier. He looked away from the soup pot and tried to shift his attention to something else. The Yinjiao people were talking about something. Wu He couldn't hear them clearly, but he could guess what they were talking about from the movement of their lips. Hey, when the great elder summoned the flame giant, he smacked them down with one slap. Do you know how they looked when they were tied up? They looked like they had been smashed with bird shit. Ha ha ha, a Yinjiao warrior said. Wu He, who had deciphered this, was speechless. Those words sounded familiar. As he continued to observe the Yinjiao guards, Wu He realized that the Yinjiao people had mentioned the word bandit. It seemed to be the name of a tribe. I feel like the Changlis are just like the bandits. They make people want to kill them. Actually, if the great elder hadn't spoken, we would have done it. But the bandits seem to be harder to catch. Up until now, we've only caught one bandit, but the Changlis caught 5. Another Yinjiao warrior said to his companion. The content of his words made Wu He very unhappy. Bandit? What the hell was a bandit? How could they be compared to the Changlis? Why did the Yinjiao people say that they were stronger than the Changlis? Was there someone here who could compete with the Changlis? Wu He tried every day to find out more about the bandits from the guards and waited for the Changlis to come and save them. On the 5th day after Wu He and the others were captured, the Changlis finally arrived. However, they weren't here in Yinjiao, but at the Flaming River trading point. They wouldn't let the Changlis into Yinjiao's headquarters. Xiao Xian took out the animal skin scroll filled with words from the mountain, rolled it up, put it in a bamboo tube, and closed it. This was the letter everyone had written over the past 5 days to their old neighbor, the Taiha tribe. Under the night sky, Xiao Xian walked towards the Flaming River trading point. At the same time, he brought Wu He, whose hands and feet were cuffed, with him. To prove that these people were still alive, he had to bring a living person. Among the 5 of them, Wu He seemed to be the core of the group. He was also in the best state of mind, so he was the most suitable person to bring along. When Wu He heard that someone had come to save them, he was very happy. Although their mission had failed and they had embarrassed the Changlis, when he thought about how they would soon be free from their prison, his listlessness from a few days ago was swept away and he eagerly went over. Chapter 694. When Xiao Xian arrived at the Flaming River Castle, the Flaming River trading point was already very quiet. Only a few houses were lit up by water moon stones and other illuminating crystals. When the guard outside the Flaming River Castle saw Xiao Xian, he gestured to let Xiao Xian know how many Changlis were inside so that Xiao Xian could be mentally prepared. Xiao Xian nodded slightly and brought Wu He in. Outside the reception room, there were 2 people that Xiao Xian didn't know. They were probably from the Changlis. When they saw Wu He, they sneered and looked at him with disdain and mockery. Not only did he fail his mission, but he was also caught. This was indeed embarrassing for the Changlis. On the other hand, Wu He was even more nervous. He wasn't afraid of being mocked by the 2 people outside. He could always mock them back next time. Who was afraid of who? Everyone had been mocking each other for a long time. The Changlis also compared their performance. Wu He had always been better than the 2 people, so he didn't care about their mockery. What made him nervous was the people inside. Who would come this time? Xiao Xian knocked twice on the door and opened it. Other than Zheng Luo and Duo Kong, there were 5 strangers inside. They should be the Changlis who came after hearing the news. Before Xiao Xian arrived, Zheng Luo had already talked to them once. At this time, the room was very quiet. Zheng Luo and Duo Kong seemed to be thinking about something. The 5 people didn't seem like they were going to make a sound either. They were all waiting quietly. When Xiao Xian opened the door, everyone inside looked at the door. The 5 Changlis looked at Wu He at first, then they looked at Xiao Xian and sized him up. Among the 5 people, the first person that Xiao Xian noticed was the only one who was sitting. The man didn't look strong and was dressed like a tribesman from the Flaming River region. There wasn't anything special about him. Behind him was a big, muscular man with a bronze hammer in his hand. He stood there like a wall, not bothering to hide his ferocious aura. If he was in a crowd, he would definitely be noticed. However, the most dangerous person was the only one who was sitting down. His body was thin, but he was like a saber hidden in a scabbard. When Xiao Xian entered, the man's closed eyes slowly opened. He casually turned his head to look at Xiao Xian, but the gaze in his eyes was as sharp as a blade, as if a sharp blade had been unsheathed. Xiao Xian became vigilant. This person's status in Chang'e was probably extremely high. Just as Xiao Xian was thinking this, Wu He, who had been brought in, let out a howl and rushed over to kneel in front of the man. "Boss, why are you here? Are you here to save us? When can we leave?" The man glanced at Wu He, then looked away expressionlessly as if he didn't see Wu He's howl. He said to Zheng Luo, "I've agreed to your request." "Where's the thing?" Xiao Xian looked at Zheng Luo. When he saw Zheng Luo nod, he took out the bamboo tube. "Don't worry, I said I won't look. I won't let anyone see it before it's delivered," said the man. After that, the man left with his men. He didn't like to talk too much. The more he spoke, the more he revealed. He didn't even look at Wu He as he left. The two Chang'e people guarding the door smiled at Wu He before they left. Their smiles were filled with schadenfreude. 7 long-winged birds took off from the Flaming River Castle and left the Flaming River trading point. They quickly disappeared into the night. "Boss, are we leaving just like that? Are we leaving Wu He and the others behind?" On the long-winged bird, one of the Chang'e people carefully looked at his boss's expression and asked. If they stayed in Yanjiao, Wu He and the others wouldn't be treated well. They didn't know how long they would have to wait for the letter to be delivered. They're howling so loudly. It's obvious they're fine. The others won't be in too much trouble either. Just treat this as a punishment for failing the mission. It was rare for them to cross the sea, but the moment they arrived, they received news that Wu He and the others were captured in front of so many people. How could they not be angry? As the leader of the Chang'e people, he felt humiliated. If Yanjiao had killed Wu He and the others, he would have organized another round of revenge. However, Yanjiao didn't kill them. Instead, they gave him a strange condition. Actually, delivering a letter wasn't difficult for them. It just took some time. When they thought about the destination of the letter, they couldn't help but suspect Yanjiao's intentions. "Yanjiao is very ambitious," sighed the man. "How is Yanjiao ambitious? I don't see them declaring war on anyone." Another Chang'e was confused. Some things don't have to be declared war to achieve. After the Chang'e people left, Wu He, who was left behind in the Yanjiao tribe, was taken back to the cave and continued to be locked up. "It's over." "Did the boss give up on us?" asked one of the people in the cave sadly. "Definitely not. The boss made a deal with the Yanjiao people. Once the deal is done, he'll definitely come back for us," said Wu He. It wasn't that he didn't understand. He just didn't want to be locked up here forever. Every day, he had to fight with the mosquitoes and insects in the cave. There were also those coarse grains. Yanjiao had planted so many good things, but they only gave them this. Wu He had protested, but all he got was one sentence from the Yanjiao people: "A captive should act like a captive." How could he have the nerve to ask for conditions after being caught for stealing? Did bird shit get into his brain? "I want to eat meat. Hot, freshly roasted, fearsome beast meat, and soup." Wu He shouted to himself. He didn't expect the Yanjiao people to treat them well. He was just shouting to vent his frustration. Footsteps sounded. Someone had entered the cave. Wu He and the others even heard the few Yanjiao people guarding the cave call out, "Grand Elder." As the footsteps got closer, they could smell the thick aroma of barbecued meat. It was very fragrant. Just by smelling the aroma, they knew that the barbecued meat must have been seasoned well. It was not overcooked, nor was it cold and hard. It must be similar to the spiced barbecued meat they had in the flaming river trading point. Because of this, they salivated even faster. Wu He wiped away the saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth and looked at the newcomer. You want to eat fresh, hot fearsome beast meat? That's not impossible. Xiao Xian came in with a large ceramic bowl. The lid of the bowl had been removed when he entered the cave. The wind blew into the cave, blowing the aroma of the roasted meat into the cave. Wu He took 2 deep breaths. When he heard Xiao Xian's words, he scrambled to his feet. His eyes were glowing like a hungry wolf that hadn't eaten for a long time. What conditions? He wasn't stupid. The Yinzhou people would never give them what they wanted without conditions. Xiao Xian took out a small black piece and handed it to Wu He. How did you make this? Wu He knew what Xiao Xian was holding with one glance. It was from the black shield they used to rob the Yinzhou grains. Xiao Xian only had a small piece in his hand. What were the Chonglis most afraid of? Temptation. Their curiosity was always weak in the face of temptation, whether it was food or something else. But at this moment, they didn't dare to say a word about the conditions to obtain this delicious food. This was the Chonglis' secret. They wouldn't tell anyone, not even if they starved to death. Chapter 695. Xiao Xian knew that the black shield Wu He and the others were using was similar to rubber, but it was different. Rubber was not unfamiliar to the Yinzhou people. After living in the mountains for so many years, they had learned from their exploration of plants that the thick liquid of certain trees could be applied to clothes to make waterproof. They could also make waterproof shoes that wouldn't get wet on rainy days. However, the Yinzhou people felt that it was too troublesome and uncomfortable to wear. It affected their movements, so they rarely used it. After all, at that time, technology was lacking and materials were limited. Xiao Xian had wanted to try more, but he realized that the Yinzhou people weren't interested in it. They didn't use it much when hunting, so he put it aside. However, when they were harvesting crops, Xiao Xian was very interested in the black shield used by the Chonglis to steal grains from the 1,000-grain gold fields. That wasn't normal rubber, so Xiao Xian didn't know the steps to make it. The rubber was lighter than the ones Xiao Xian used in the past, and it could block most arrows. Even the spear he threw couldn't completely penetrate the black shield, and part of the spear's handle was stuck in it. Wu He and the others showed an unusually firm attitude towards Xiao Xian's question. Although their eyes were glued to the bowl of meat, they didn't miss a single word. In order to block out the temptation, some of them even held their breath until their faces turned red. Xiao Xian looked at the 5 people seriously and said, "It's fine if you don't want to say it. Let's change the conditions." "Say it." Wu He glared at Xiao Xian. How could they answer such a difficult condition? If they changed the conditions, it might also be difficult for them to speak. Even so, he still had hope. As long as it didn't involve the secrets of the Chonglis, he could say anything, including the secrets of the slave masters. "You Chonglis have been to many places," Xiao Xian said as he observed the 5 people in the cage. The Chonglis were proud of the places they had been to. Even the slave masters might not have been to as many places as the Chonglis. Wu He and the other 4 couldn't help but look pleased. "Then draw a picture," Xiao Xian said. "Ah. What do you mean? You want us to draw the places we know about?" Wu He dug his ears with his fingers, emphasizing each word carefully to make sure he didn't hear wrong. "We've been to so many places. How can we possibly draw all of them? You don't even know how to draw maps." "Forget it then." Xiao Xian took the bowl of meat and turned to leave. "Wait." Wu He stretched out a hand from between the stone pillars. "Why are you in such a hurry? I didn't say I couldn't draw. Why didn't you just say that you only wanted a map?" Xiao Xian stood there without moving. "You can draw?" "Nonsense, of course I can. Come back, that." Wu He pointed at the bowl in Xiao Xian's hand. put it down. Let's talk nicely. They would rather starve to death than tell anyone about the creation of the Black Shield. But if it was just a map, they could draw it. Other than the hideouts that the Changlis didn't want people to know about, they were more than willing to draw the other places, especially the slave master cities. After we draw it, can you let us eat meat every day? What I want you to take, don't use those things that look like burnt wood. Use good grains too. Like the ones you just harvested, those golden ones. Hey, don't go. Wait. Stop. Let's talk nicely. Seeing Xiao Xian walk out again, Wu He became anxious. The 4 people behind him wanted to beat him up. They were anxious at the side. They finally had a chance to improve their lives, but it was almost rejected by Wu He just like that. They weren't asking for as much as Wu He said. They only wanted a little improvement. At the very least, they should put some soft hay on the ground, right? The ground was uneven. The broken bones that had just healed almost broke again after lying on the ground for a nap. All right, tell me. Where do you want to draw it? Once you're done, hurry up and get us some food. I'm starving. Wu He sat on the ground and urged. As soon as Wu He finished speaking, he was kicked to the side. The tall, skinny man looked at Xiao Xian with a smile. His face was full of flattery, as if he wasn't the one who had snatched the grains. He's been starving recently. Great elder, don't mind him. Come, let's continue. What do you want to draw? Where do you want to draw it? How detailed do you want it to be? The tall, skinny man's mouth was bubbling as he asked a series of questions. Draw a simple one first. Just a rough map of the continent over there, Xiao Xian said. Wu He and the others cursed in their hearts. Simple? Just as Wu He was about to say something, someone covered his mouth and dragged him to a corner furthest away from the prison door. Only the tall, skinny man was left there to talk to Xiao Xian. We'll do our best. All right, I'll get someone to bring the drawing board over later. I'll also prepare the brushes for you. As for the treatment you mentioned, that will depend on your performance. Xiao Xian's last sentence was a warning. Don't let me find out that you're faking it. Otherwise, you'll be tortured. All right, don't worry. The tall, skinny man rubbed his hands and glanced at the bowl of meat. Xiao Xian handed the bowl over. The tall, skinny man hugged the bowl gratefully, afraid that Xiao Xian would go back on his word. Even Wu He, who was full of resentment, stopped talking and went over to snatch the bowl. The Changlis liked to enjoy themselves. They never mistreated themselves. Even when they came to this foreign continent, they always had the mentality of having fun. They liked to eat whatever was good to eat, play wherever they could, and find some excitement when they were bored. They didn't care about anything else. To put it bluntly, their mentality was, as long as you let me eat, drink, and play, whatever you want, as long as I can give it to you, I won't refuse. To the other Changlis, Wu He and the others would live a miserable life as captives if they stayed in Yanjiao. Since Yanjiao promised not to kill them, they would definitely keep them alive. After all, the deal was still in progress. But that was it. Dirty living quarters, coarse and rotten grains, and being locked up in a palm-sized place every day were normal. Perhaps others wouldn't mind, but to the Changlis, it was torture. Life was meant to be enjoyed, not tortured. They would go crazy if they couldn't enjoy life and freedom. That was why the Changlis who left the Flaming River Castle all felt that letting Wu He and the other 4 stay in the Flaming Horn tribe was the best punishment for the 5 of them. But those people didn't know that the 5 people who were supposed to be in a worse situation were actually drawing maps for better treatment. Not long after Xiao Xian left the cave, someone carried a stone slab that was almost as tall as a person into the cave. Wu He and the others looked at the polished stone slab in front of them. The flesh on their faces trembled. This drawing board is too big. The Changlis wouldn't reveal the secret of the Black Shield. Xiao Xian was prepared for this. His main goal wasn't the secret of the Black Shield, but the map of the other side of the sea. Even if it wasn't complete, at least he could get a rough idea of it from the Changlis. It would be more convenient for him in the future. The other side of the sea wasn't like here. There were many people on the other side of the sea. Caravans, adventurers, tribes that migrated from time to time, and so on. All these factors would reduce the number of unknown areas on the other side of the sea. On the other hand, because of the primitive fire seed, the tribesmen rarely migrated and never spread out too far. Even the expedition teams would travel back and forth between a few fixed places all year round instead of exploring unknown areas. Now that the few tribes in the central region had started to move, perhaps in the future, this side would develop into the same state as the other side of the sea. But that wasn't something that could be achieved in 1 or 2 years. The Changlis could provide them with a shortcut that would allow them to understand more about the other side of the sea. Xiao Xian would check on Wu He and the others' progress every day. If he was satisfied, he would get someone to change their straw mats. The food was also slightly better, but it was still far from what the Changlis wanted. Hence, Wu He and the others worked even harder. They believed that if they continued, the straw mats in the cave would be replaced with animal hides, and the food would become more delicious. Life would still be beautiful, and they could still enjoy being prisoners in a cell. Other than checking on Wu He and the others' progress, Xiao Xian spent the rest of his time in the secret underground room of the Flaming River Castle, continuing to study the mummified monster. On the other side of the sea, in the dense forest, it was harvest season again. The Taiha tribesmen harvested all the herbs they needed to harvest, and dried those that needed to be dried under the sun. After the follow-up processing, the expedition team set off again. Every time the expedition team set off, they had the habit of resting for a while at a fork in the road. Although they knew there wouldn't be another team carrying large bags of animal hides, they would still take a look in that direction. This wasn't requested by the team leader, but something that everyone in the expedition team would do. Both teams had decades of chemistry, so it wasn't easy to change it even if they wanted to. After Yanjiao left, they took over Yanjiao's land, but no one moved there to live. First of all, the Taiha tribe didn't have a large population. They could guard their own territory, but it wasn't reliable to split into 2 groups. Also, Yanjiao's land wasn't good enough. It could grow normal crops, but it couldn't grow herbs. Even if they could, the quality of the herbs wouldn't be good enough. After all, the Taiha tribe had improved their land for generations. After Yanjiao left, the flock of ducks also left. The situation in the forest changed again. Some tribes left, and some came in. There had been more than a dozen battles. It was relatively safe, suitable for living, and not too far from the city, so there were limited resources. In the past, when Yanjiao was still here, Yanjiao and the Taiha tribe worked together. Very few people dared to offend them openly, but after Yanjiao left, the other tribes in the forest treated the Taiha tribe differently. The Taiha tribe wanted to find another tribe to work with, but they couldn't find one as trustworthy as Yanjiao. Even the Mountain Wind tribe, whom they had worked with before, couldn't find one. Not long ago, the 2 tribes had a conflict and parted on bad terms. Usually, they didn't quarrel, and the leader of the Taiha tribe's hunting team had a bad temper. Other than necessary trade trips, they didn't interact with other tribes. The shaman said that this was probably loneliness. Chapter 696. After the expedition team left, in the Taiha tribe, the chief and shaman discussed their next plan. In the past few days, they discovered more tribesmen entering the forest. The Taiha chief wouldn't be so worried if it was just the migrating tribes of the past. This time, it wasn't just one tribe that entered the forest. It was people from many different tribes. They seemed to be looking for something. When the trading team returns, we should be able to bring back some news, said the Taiha shaman. This was not a good sign. Ever since the disaster, the slave masters had been behaving strangely, as if they were preparing for something big. If it had nothing to do with them, then so be it. But the changes in the forest clearly had a lot to do with the slave masters. Tribes like them who lived far away in the forest didn't have much information. They could only speculate based on the changes in the forest. I wonder what's going to happen. The Taiha chief was worried too. Their situation wasn't good either. They were probably used to working with Yanjiao. Now they felt a lot of pressure. They could feel the greedy eyes in the forest. If it weren't for the fact that they still had some ability, a third of the herbs they'd collected over the past 6 months would have been stolen. This was why the expedition team was in a hurry to bring them out to trade after this harvest. They didn't feel safe leaving them here. It was better to trade for more. If only Yanjiao was still here. The Taiha chief sighed. He and Zheng Luo had worked together for decades. If they counted back from their ancestors, it had been hundreds of years. The Taiha shaman could only sigh helplessly. No matter how much pressure there was, they had to bear it. They couldn't always count on others. The Taiha people were not cowards. For the next few days, the Taiha chief and shaman discussed countermeasures. The more news they received about the people entering the forest, the more uneasy they felt. In less than 10 days, the number of people entering the forest doubled. Most of them were strangers. What surprised the Taiha chief the most was that they even found people from the Black Bears. They weren't familiar with them, but they recognized the leader. It was Mauda, whom they'd interacted with before. However, the relationship between the Taiha tribe and the Black Bears was not as close as the relationship between Yanjiao and the Black Bears. Caravans always prioritized profits. What Yanjiao could give to the Black Bears, Taiha might not be able to. As the leader of a tribe, the Taiha chief tossed and turned in bed every day. He always felt that something big was going to happen. Sometimes, he would spend the whole night thinking about the information he had gathered, but he still couldn't come to a conclusion. Just as the Taiha leader was getting more and more anxious, the patrolling guards hurriedly ran to him. "Leader, someone's here." Hearing this, the Taiha leader's first reaction was, finally. He thought they were newcomers to the forest, so he asked, "Which tribe are they from?" The patrolling soldier who came over had a strange look on his face. He said hesitantly, he said he was from Changle. "Who?" The Taiha leader thought he heard wrong. He had thought of many people, but he never thought of this name. "Chang." "Chang Li's," the soldier repeated. "Tell him to come over." "Forget it, I'll go out." The Taiha leader didn't want to lead the Changle people to the central area of the tribe. The Changle people didn't have a good reputation. If they didn't come here themselves, no one in the Taiha tribe would want to interact with them. The Changle person who came over was a young man. He was the only one. There were no other Changle people, but the Taiha leader didn't dare to be careless. From what he knew, the Changle people rarely moved alone. Although there was only one person in front of him, who knew how many others were hiding in the dark. After the young man from Changle arrived at the Taiha tribe, he had been observing the tribe. Although the Taiha people grew more herbs, he didn't see many things that interested him. He scanned the area with his picky eyes. When he started to get impatient, he saw the Taiha people coming over. "You're the Taiha leader?" The young man looked at the leader. "Yes, I am." The Taiha leader frowned. He didn't understand why the Changle people were here. Just as he was about to ask, the young man threw a bamboo tube at him. A person with a bad reputation who needed to be on high alert suddenly threw something over. Normal people would avoid it immediately. The Taiha leader was the same. However, a moment of hesitation made him stop in his tracks. He raised his hand and caught the bamboo tube. Seeing the Taiha people's vigilance, the young man curled his lips. He seemed to be disdainful of the Taiha people's reaction. After a while, he said, "It's a letter from your old friend. Hurry up and read it." "I don't want to wait." "Old friend?" The Taiha leader was confused. There were only a few people who could be called an old friend. However, when he saw the flame totem on the seal of the bamboo tube, his eyelids twitched. He said to the patrolling soldiers beside him, take this young man to rest. The patrolling soldiers didn't know how to react to their leader's sudden order. However, the Taiha leader had already run away with the bamboo tube. He looked very anxious. After learning that Yanjiao had sent a letter, the Taiha shaman couldn't sit still anymore. He went over to the Taiha leader. Is Yanjiao planning to come back? Also, why would Yanjiao send a letter from the Changle people? I don't know. Let's take a look first. The bamboo tube was sealed with resin. If the tube was opened, the resin would definitely crack. However, since it was sealed so well, the Changle people shouldn't have peeked inside. He hurriedly opened the tube and carefully took out the animal skin scroll. After reading what was written on it, the Taiha leader was stunned for a long time. They didn't expect Yanjiao to develop so well. However, that wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing in the animal skin scroll was whether the Taiha tribe had any plans to migrate. If it was summed up in one sentence, we've already prepared the land for you. We've also given you suggestions for your future plans. Come and show off. This was still very attractive to the Taiha tribe at the moment. Migrate? It wasn't impossible. However, how would they migrate? How dangerous would the process be? How many difficulties would they encounter? They had to think about this carefully. This part of the forest was no longer safe. As time passed, more and more people would enter the forest. The Taiha leader and shaman thought about it for 3 days. During these 3 days, the traveling team came back earlier than expected and brought back a piece of news. The slave masters were indeed making a big move. Although they still didn't know what they wanted to do, from the royal city to other big and small cities, there were bounty posters. There were animals and plants on the posters. If anyone found them, the 6 noble families of the royal city would reward them handsomely. Those animals and plants were rarely seen in ordinary places, and some of them had never even been heard of. However, the conditions given by the slave owners made everyone envious. Why were there more and more people entering this forest? It was because most of those things were in the forest. Also, I heard that the slave masters might send people into the forest in the future. What should we do in the future? The leader of the traveling team was worried. If that was really the case, they wouldn't be able to live in peace. They might even encounter those people when hunting. Fighting was unavoidable. They had to be mentally prepared. They weren't interested in the bounties offered by the slave masters. They just wanted to live a peaceful life here. After hearing this news, the Taiha leader and shaman looked at each other. Their decision shifted again. The things Yanjiao wrote on the animal skin scroll were too tempting. They also showed their absolute sincerity. Instead of being troubled here, unable to hunt freely, and having to deal with unnecessary disputes, they might as well take a gamble. However, migrating the tribe was not a small matter. They had to reply first. After thinking carefully, the Taiha leader wrote a reply. He expressed his interest in Yanjiao's proposal. At the same time, he listed out the situation here and the difficulties they had to solve in order to migrate. After the Changle people left with the letter, the Taiha leader gathered everyone in the tribe. The Yanjiao people used to speak another language. Who knows it? Teach them. Everyone else, learn it. It will be useful in the future. When the Taiha's letter arrived in Yanjiao's hands again, Yanjiao had already obtained the map drawn by Wu He and the others. They discussed a solution. Xiao Xian wrote another reply and placed a universal eye in the bamboo tube. Here, there's another letter. You still want to send it? Are you fucking kidding me? The Changle's leader was unwilling. Forget it. Just kill Wu He and the others. Of course, this was completely out of anger. The Changle's leader couldn't just abandon Wu He and the others. They had already sent the letter once. The deal was half done. He wasn't willing to just give up now. However, he wouldn't personally deliver the letter this time. After all, most of the previous letters were delivered by his subordinates. He would leave the task of delivering letters to them. The Changle's leader had his own plans. He didn't want to waste time on this. Xiao Xian didn't care if the Changle's leader was the one who delivered the letter. He only cared about whether the letter could be delivered safely and whether the person who delivered the letter could continue to keep it a secret. During this period of time, many things happened on the mainland. The biggest change was, of course, the merging of the Hui tribe's fire seed. Xiao Xian could sense the changes in the fire seed. Perhaps others couldn't sense it, but Xiao Xian, Gui Zhe, and the two retired shamans all sensed it. This was just the beginning. Following the Hui tribe's change, the other tribes in the central region also started to experience the same changes. They had been observing the situation. The Hui tribe's success made them more determined to do so. While the ancient fire seed had its benefits, there were too many restrictions. Plus, as more and more people from the other mainland came to this place, they were anxious. They sent people to look for Xiao Xian to ask for more details about merging the fire seed. Although they had asked before, they couldn't afford any mistakes when it came to the fire seed. They would rather spend more time and effort asking again and again. They didn't want anything to go wrong during the merging process. Xiao Xian believed that with these few tribes taking the lead, the other smaller tribes would also make the same choice. Especially the smaller tribes that relied on the larger tribes. They would choose the path that was beneficial to them. This mainland was going to welcome a major turning point. If the primitive fire seed was extinguished, even if all the people in the tribe were alive, they would be no different from dead people. They were very clear about the living conditions of the wanderers. However, if the fire seed was merged, even if the entire tribe died, there was still a possibility of a comeback. As long as the fire seed was not extinguished, the fire would not be extinguished. As long as there was a little blood, the tribe would never disappear. Chapter 697. After sensing the changes in the Longboat tribe's fire seed, Xiao Xian told Duo Kong to start preparing. While they were communicating with the Taiha tribe, they had already planned everything out. The map drawn by Wu He and the other four wasn't complete and wasn't very nice to look at, but the general area was marked out. There were many things that Xiao Xian wanted to know. Although Wu He and the others worked together to steal Yanjiao's grains, they didn't work together often on the other side of the sea. They went to different places, so they were familiar with different places. If one of them made a mistake, the others would correct it because Xiao Xian said that there would be no special treatment if they made a mistake. The Taiha tribe's reply also gave them a map of the forest. The Taiha tribe's chief couldn't decide which route was more convenient and less dangerous, so they took out their treasured map. It was something that even Zheng Luo and the others didn't know about. In order to find herbs, the ancestors of the Taiha tribe would leave for a year or even longer. They would draw a rough map of the places they went. Generation after generation, the maps were constantly perfected. They had a more complete and detailed map in their hands. Although it was only about herbs, it could still be used as an important reference. That way, they could also avoid unnecessary trouble and danger. Xiao Xian compared the maps given by Wu He and the Taiha tribe, then combined it with the topography and tribe distribution. After discussing with the others, they decided to take another route. The continental plate on the other side of the sea was in the shape of a V. The bottom of the V was where Xiao Xian brought his people to cross the sea. It was also the closest point between the two continents. However, since last year, the slave master's army had occupied that area and stationed themselves along the coastline. It wasn't easy to get there. They wouldn't let a tribe cross the sea so easily, especially one that had good relations with Yanjiao. The Taiha tribe's chief probably thought of this reason too, so he took out his treasured map. If Yanjiao didn't send a letter from Changlu, they wouldn't have taken this risk. They didn't trust the Changlis, but they trusted Yanjiao. In the end, they still preferred the sea route. In the letter they wrote back, they also asked for Yanjiao's opinion. When they were there, Xiao Xian knew that from where the Taiha tribe was, if they walked deeper into the forest, there would be a wider river. That river could cut through the entire forest. If they walked along the river, they might reach the sea. However, it was too far away, and no one in the Yinjiao tribe had ever seen it. They had only heard about it from some tribesmen who came from there. On the map given by the Taiha tribe, there were some relevant routes. That river did indeed lead to the sea. The Taiha chief also mentioned his thoughts in his letter. He did plan to walk along the river, but he would not go near it. There were too many crocodiles by the river, and no one wanted to provoke those terrifying beasts, especially when there was an even more terrifying giant crocodile in the river. But what should they do when they reached the seaside? Build your own ship. Their shipbuilding skills were not good. Moreover, they were able to identify the direction in the forest, but would they get lost in the sea? They did not have any confidence at all. Xiao Xian's plan was to send people to help them. Where would the ship come from? The Longboat tribe would agree to Yanjiao's request to build a ship. They had the intention to explore the sea for a long time, just looking at the newly built ships. If they only wanted to sail on the river, they did not need those designs. In the past, because of the fire seed, they could not leave their tribe for long periods of time. But now, their ambitions had begun. It could be said that other than the Hui tribe, the Longboat tribe was the most eager to merge their fire seed among the other major tribes. This time, they could cooperate with the Longboat tribe. Before the Longboat tribe merged their fire seed, they sent people to ask Xiao Xian about the details of merging the fire seed. Xiao Xian also asked them about the rivers on this side of the continent. The Longboat tribe had never been to the Flaming River, so they did not know about it. However, they knew a little about the central region and the grasslands. They just never told anyone. This time, because of the fire seed, they told Xiao Xian about it. On the other side of the grassland, there was a river that extended all the way to the end of the grassland. There were many high mountains there. Although there were fearsome beasts, there were far fewer of them compared to the fearsome beast forest and the forest behind the Flaming Horn tribe. This was because the rocks and soil there were not suitable for plants to grow. There were no dense ancient forests, and there were not many types of beasts either. The most abundant species were probably eagles. The eagles of the Tian Shan tribe and the giant mountain eagles of the Hui tribe mostly lived there. The river meandered through the mountains all the way to the sea. This was what the ancestors of the Longboat tribe knew. They knew even more about it than the Hui and Tian Shan tribes of the grasslands. To the Longboat tribe, the river was like a blood vessel and the ship was their blood vessel. Both were extremely important. Perhaps this route was longer than the one Xiao Xian and the others took, but it was relatively safer. The only thing they had to worry about was the uncertainty of the sea. However, the Taiha people dared to gamble on the sea. They did not want to meet the slave masters directly. After all, they were migrating their entire tribe, bringing the elderly, children, and those who had not awakened their totemic power. As long as they did not go too far from the coast, even if they encountered danger, they would not be wiped out. That's it. Xiao Xian discussed with the others in the room. He would be going with them this time. Originally, he planned to let Xiao Xian and Duo Kong lead the group since they were the most familiar with the Taiha people. However, in the end, Zheng Luo decided to let Xiao Xian and Duo Kong lead the group while he stayed at the Flaming River trading point. It was not that Zheng Luo did not want to go. He actually missed his old friends and hoped that they could come and help them. However, he knew that the Longboat tribe cared about Xiao Xian the most. Other than Xiao Xian, the Longboat tribe was not afraid of the Yanjiao tribe. With Xiao Xian around, Zheng Luo felt more at ease. Xiao Xian and Duo Kong were going to lead the group to the Longboat tribe. Then, they would travel with the Longboat tribe to the grasslands through the sea. The Longboat tribe was familiar with the sea routes. If they could go according to plan and enter the sea from there, they would be able to sail directly to the other continent and avoid the conflicts along the coastline. They would then meet up with the Taiha tribe at the agreed location. After counting the number of people, Xiao Xian brought along the equipment they had prepared and boarded the ship. They would go to the Longboat tribe with Duo Kong and the others. After leaving this time, it would be next year when they returned with the group. They needed to go out to sea before winter to avoid the river freezing. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.